It must be fought for, protected, and handed on to them to do the same. Sadly, history shows us that freedom is fragile and needs protection. Governments too often turn to tyranny, and they attack individual rights when their governments grow too large. This results in a loss of individual rights and lives. History shows us that these cases where government has grown too large and tyrannical, it always begins with the state taking away people's rights to protect themselves. Limiting the right to own and carry firearms has caused some of the worst tragedies in the history of the world, with the most occurring in the recent centuries. Socialist, fascist, and communist governments in the past century have killed more than 100 million of their own citizens. These evil governments, bent on destroying individual liberty, always begin with the goal of taking away or disarming individuals, which ultimately leads to genocide. And here are just a few examples. Under the Ottoman Empire, they first required people to have permits and had a government list of the owners who had firearms, and then put a ban on the possession. This resulted eventually in the death of nearly 1.5 million Christians in Turkey in the early part of the 19th century. The Soviet Union banned possession of firearms and had severe penalties. This resulted in the death of nearly 20 million civilians in the 1920s through 40s. In Nazi Germany, as we all know, they first banned the possession of firearms and had strict restrictions on handguns. This resulted ultimately in the deaths of over 20 million people of certain ethnic groups and political opponents during the 1930s and 40s. To go on, Communist China had strict penalties for their opponents if they were found with firearms, and ultimately resulted in the death of nearly 35 million civilians from the 1950s through the 70s. In Guatemala, they began registration of firearms and required licensing with high fees and prohibited the carrying of firearms and banned guns. And they ultimately killed almost 200,000 Mayan Indians in what is known as the Silent Holocaust. In Uganda, they registered all gun owners first and then began warrantless searches of handgun confiscations, which resulted in 300,000 Christians being killed by their own government during the 1970s. In Cambodia, they required licensing for firearms first, ammunition, and transactions were required with a photo ID, fingerprints for gun owners, which resulted in 2 million Cambodians being killed by their own government. And recently in Rwanda, they required registration of guns and ammunition, concealable guns were illegal, and they had confiscations as well, and ultimately over 800,000 Tutsi were murdered in 1994. All of these poor individuals were disarmed first, left helpless and defenseless against their own government. And after they were disarmed, the tyranny and the genocide was allowed. But thank God America is different, because our framers and our founders knew differently. They knew how important the right to firearms and the right to protect oneself was in order to keep a free society. Thomas Jefferson said, "No free man shall ever be disbarred the use of arms." George Mason said, "To disarm the people is the most effectual way to enslave them." And James Madison stated, "The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." So I say this because some people don't get it. It is blindingly obvious that the American framers and founders never intended for the right to bear arms to be extended only to the right. The Second Amendment is intended to ensure that we Americans protect not only our lives, but our way of life, to protect our homes, our state, our country from both foreign and domestic entities, to protect our God-given rights. And fortunately, there are many people who disagree with this. And there are interest groups that wish to take away these rights from law-abiding Americans, all the way from Beto O'Rourke to President Joe Biden. The right to bear arms is under assault. Here are some examples of recent actions taken by our own president because of his disdain for gun ownership. The president supports a ban on certain firearms and magazine capacities, as though you should have a limit on how much you can defend yourself. The president has announced 6 executive orders recently on gun restrictions. He supports federal red flag law system. He went so far as to say that the Constitution and the use of this to defense is a phony argument. Does this sound like a president who values the same values that Missouri values? Does this sound like someone that Missouri citizens that has us in his best interest? No, in fact, the opposite is true. Senate Bill 39, otherwise known as the Second Amendment Preservation Act, is the line in the sand that we should draw. Those politicians in Washington, D.C. can pass and are attempting to pass whatever crazy, wild-eyed ideas that they have. But with this law in place, Missouri will have nothing to do with what they pass and any illegal infringements that they pass against our Second Amendment rights, because it will do the following. It will declare Missouri's resolve in supporting the Second Amendment. It will declare that the federal supremacy does not apply to federal laws that restrict or prohibit the manufacture, ownership, and the use of firearms, firearms accessories, or ammunition. It will declare that all federal laws that infringe on our rights to bear arms will be invalid when it comes to the perspective of the state of Missouri. And it declares to the courts that they have a duty to protect the rights of law-abiding citizens. And lastly, it prohibits our local officials from being commandeered, from enforcing federal laws that are not on the books in Missouri. This is not a new idea. In fact, this concept of anti-commandeering was just passed by the Missouri voters recently when they passed the same form of legislation when it came to the enactment of medical marijuana. The voters instructed our state that they should not be enforcing federal laws when it comes to marijuana. And so this bill, in essence, is saying that in the same way, we will not be enforcing the federal laws when it comes to firearms. By instructing our state and local officials to not enforce or help the federal gun control efforts, it is a common sense measure and focuses our law enforcement on enforcing the laws that we pass here and the decisions that we make here. Why? Because we owe it to our constituents to stand up and say that enough is enough. Our voters have put their faith and trust in us to protect Missouri's rights. It isn't enough to make statements on social media or to talk tough back home or talk tough in the press. It's time to stand up and protect our rights. We need to take action and pass this bill. Someday, we'll be able to tell our kids and our grandkids about the stories that we went through at this time. And they'll ask, why didn't you stand up? And I want to say, and I want to be able to look them in the eye and be proud and say that we stood up and ensured that the same rights that we had at this time are the rights that they'll have in the future. And with that, I'm happy to entertain questions.
You've heard the motion from the senator from the 20th. Does any senator desire to be heard? Senator from the 5th?
Thank you. To inquire of the senator from Platte.
Does the senator from Platte yield?
I do.
He does. Proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. I just wanted to go through a couple sections, just a few sections in here, with another legal mind, with you being the chair of Judiciary. I feel like where there's some constitutional issues in this bill, and just wanted to get your thoughts on those. So the first 4 pages, the preamble just kind of talks about our state's support of firearms, but really when you get to page 4, line 1, that's where it starts talking about what we consider infringements and things like that. Have you had a chance to kind of look through those sections?
You're talking about the preamble sections?
No, just after. So we'll skip over the preamble. we'll just go to starting on page 4. And I'm focused on the part where it says, the following federal acts, laws, and executive orders, administrative orders, rules, and regulations shall be considered infringements on the people's right to keep and bear arms. And then they list 5 subsections. So, the first one, basically, any tax imposed on firearms, ammunition, anything that would create a chilling effect. The next, any registration or tracking of firearms, or accessories, or ammunition. Any registration of firearms, accessories, or ammunition, subsection 4, anything forbidding ownership, section 5, anything dealing with the confiscation. And then in the following section, that's where, it says that all federal laws, executive orders, etc., whether they are enacted before or after the provisions that infringe on a person's Second Amendment right, shall be invalid to the state, shall not be recognized by this state, shall not be specifically rejected by the state, and shall not be enforced by the state. So particularly the part, shall not be enforced by the state. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think what this is saying here, and you could talk to the bill sponsor about this as well, but I think what this is saying is we're not going to use state resources to enforce federal gun laws that are in conflict with state gun laws. So we obviously have gun laws in the state of Missouri. People who are dealing drugs, for example, cannot possess a firearm. It's unlawful possession of a firearm. What it is saying is that to the extent that there is an inconsistency and incongruity between state firearms law and federal firearms law, we will follow the more protective state firearms law, and that we will not use, and this is later in the bill when they talk about mutual aid and support, we will not use state resources, i.e. sheriff's departments, municipal police officers, state troopers, to enforce federal gun laws that are broader than what is allowed for under state law.
Right, and then the next it specifically says we don't have the, no authority has the ability to enforce those federal laws, right?
I'm not seeing that.
Oh yeah, line 3, page 5. No entity or person, including public officer, employee of the state, or any political subdivision of the state, shall have the authority to enforce or to attempt to enforce any of these federal laws.
Correct. Entities that are either state or creatures of state law, like municipalities, counties. Again, the example I think would be municipal police departments. Are not. We're basically saying the federal government cannot commandeer state resources to force the state of Missouri to enforce federal gun laws that do not mirror our own gun laws in the state of Missouri.
Right, so if you've got a federal agency that's trying to work with your local law enforcement agency saying, hey, this is in your area, you know where this guy is, can you go pick them up? We believe they're violating this federal law that conflicts with that, you're saying you don't want to enforce, but you're saying that, the way this is written, no state, city officers could enforce those types of laws.
So there's actually an exception. And again, I just started looking at the substitute whenever you inquired of me, but there are actually exceptions on page 8, subsection 3, starting on line 16. So, for example, one of the first exceptions where the Second Amendment Preservation Act would not apply to providing material aid and support by our law enforcement to another state, that's the first exception. The broader one, which I know the senator from the 20th worked painstakingly with law enforcement, section 4 basically says if there is a corollary crime under state law, a felony offense that's committed under state law, that we can help the trafficking is a crime under Missouri law. It is a federal crime. Child sex trafficking rings, there's frequently collaboration. For example, if there were drug rings, that's probably the most common example where you're dealing with drug dealers who frequently are illegally carrying firearms, both under Missouri and federal law. We would allow law enforcement under the SAPA statute to still be able to collect arms. The feds may come in and try to enforce it, but we are not going to help with that.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about the part, and this is the section on page 6 where it says basically any political subdivision or law enforcement.
And we do that all the time with, federal matching funds, our Medicaid program, for example, we agree to pay as transportation funding. In this context, what the General Assembly is saying,
an individual has taken action that would violate the provisions of this section shall have standing to pursue action. So basically, you know, I could just say, you know what, I think that, you know, someone took my neighbor's gun away unreasonably, so then I would have standing then to sue for that. Even though I wasn't harmed, I'm not a victim of any crime, I would be able to seek enforcement of this.
Senator, are you suggesting that we should make it more difficult to file lawsuits? Because I will say, you and I have been on the opposite side of that equation many times on this floor.
It's very, very interesting. I don't think you can do that. And then the next part, I believe it's any person residing or conducting business in the jurisdiction who believes that an individual has taken. So if you're basically, if you're in the area, if you think someone, I don't know, I guess that could lead to some harassment, though. I mean, all you got to say is, hey, I think, you know, this department took away this person's gun or firearm accessory or whatever unreasonably. All right, but I guess
that's a concept. I mean, I know that'll be familiar to you as an attorney, so-called taxpayer standing, and there are actually a lot of different areas where we grant generalized taxpayer standing under the code. Usually it's found in sections where there's something of great public importance, where we want those public rights to be vindicated in court, and certainly protecting one of the provisions of the Bill of Rights is a very important public right.
Okay, thank you for the inquiry, Senator. Mr. President?
Senator from the 5th.
Thank you to inquire of the Senator from Green.
Senator from Green or Senator from the 20th?
Senator from the 20th.
Senator from the 20th, you yield to an inquiry.
Yes.
He does. Proceed.
Thank you, Senator. There was a particular area I wanted to draw your attention to. So, you know, it talks about the infringements, and then part of it says, you know, any act forbidding the possession, ownership, use, or transfer of a firearm. So are you familiar with the Firearm Owners Protection Act of 1986?
Firearm?
Yeah, so basically that was the piece of legislation that barred the possession of newly manufactured machine guns. So, you know, for example, if you wanted to get an automatic rifle, you can if it's before 1986 if it was lawfully owned, but you couldn't, you know, today just go ahead and get an automatic rifle.
Okay.
Anyone be able to legally own a machine gun in the state of Missouri?
No, not under federal law.
Right, but but in the state of Missouri you would be able to, though, right? Because
No.
of okay,
No,
could you explain that to me? Because my understanding of that section, you know, any act forbidding the possession of a firearm or ownership would be considered an infringement.
So it would be, and first of all, that you'd need to look at Missouri statutes as well, because they are prohibited in Missouri statutes. Most of what's prohibited on the federal level is prohibited in Missouri statutes. Law would still make it illegal. And if someone from ATF wanted to enforce that and prosecute someone if someone was violating Missouri's Chapter 571 when it came to automatic weapons, fully automatic weapons, then they could be prosecuted in Missouri courts, and Missouri law enforcement would then, and that's what Missouri law enforcement does anyway.
Okay, so that one is covered by Missouri statutes.
Yes.
I haven't looked. Okay, that's good to know. So nothing would prohibit our local law enforcement agencies from being able to seize someone if they're possessing a machine gun.
Correct.
Okay.
I did have an answer to your question earlier. You had mentioned about anyone being able to take action, or as was mentioned, taxpayer standing section. So to be clear, there's two provisions of the bill. One is that an individual who has been harmed by an acting officer, someone who is currently employed by someone in state law enforcement, that's a different section of the bill, and that individual could take action in court. The other provision is really to address what would probably be a loophole if it wasn't addressed in the bill, which is that there's a transferability of staff, often between are subdivisions of the state and federal government, and they will, so employees might be employed by one or under a different badge, and then they'll come back into the employment of the state. And so while what could happen is that they transfer their employment, and then while they're transferred to the federal government, they're able to invoke, basically enforce federal law, and then be transferred back. That section is really about taxpayers and individuals who are taking action against their local governmental entity for a practice of hiring employees that have had a known history of enforcing federal law.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I follow you. And then the other parts are regarding firearm accessories. So I remember, and I believe it was the Trump administration who passed by executive order the bump stock ban. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
So I don't believe Missouri has any laws regarding bump stocks. So if an officer was to confiscate like a bump stock, for example, would they would be violating the provisions of your bill, correct? Because I don't think that there are any Missouri laws. It was just that federal executive order that was
right, and that has been recently blocked. So you're correct. I mean, in essence, if you want to get down to the nuts and bolts of what would happen if this bill were to pass, like what's the real impact, is that substantively, because most of Missouri statute is more prohibitive than federal
Sure.
code when it comes to what firearms people can possess. We ban things like nunchucks and brass knuckles, and I mean, in essence, like you can't have a blackjack. There's some things that switchblades, things like that. But if the bump stock ban were still in effect, that is not illegal in Missouri code. And,
Right.
And in essence, that we would basically, I would say, substantively, what this bill would do at this moment, this very moment, not pending whatever actions might go forward by these executive orders, the substantive change would be that we would be telling our local law enforcement, you're not to be rounding up bump stocks. However, that's really actually not an issue because there has been there's been a block on the implementation of that.
Okay, so yeah, let's assume, like you're saying, there's it's currently blocked. Let's say the court ends up saying, hey, you know what, this was a valid executive order. You can't have bump stocks. So the St. Louis Police Department, they know this person is caught with the bump stock. They take it away from them. So would that department then be liable to a $50,000 civil penalty since it's beyond Missouri law?
And let's be clear. So we want to go to the back of the section of the bill.
And then I'm going to say there's no other crime. It's just that,
That's right.
they see this person walking around with a bump stock and they're like, we think.
That's right. And I wanted to point that out because a lot of people this provision is fairly new in the evolution of this language, was to make sure that people who are violating other provisions or any firearms provisions or provisions related to drugs, that they are not able to enjoy this benefit.
Sure.
And so yes, if the only thing that a person is doing wrong is having a bump stock, then that would be what we're telling our local law enforcement is this is not the droid you're looking for. Go do go enforce something else.
Got it. And so that, and same if they were to pass something limiting magazine bans, amounts, like saying, hey, you can only have 10 rounds.
Right.
If they're trying to get someone with a drum magazine,
and my thought is that that's a discussion for this body. If we decide that, yeah, we want our local law enforcement to be focused on enforcing those things, then that's something for our body to decide.
Okay. Thank you for the inquiry, Senator.
Thank you.
Further discussion on the adoption motion of the Senate substitute offered by the senator from the 20th District. Senator from Newton.
Inquire the senator from the 20th.
Senator from the 20th, do you yield?
Yes.
He does. Proceed.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
I like a lot about the bill. I like why you're doing it. I agree why you're doing it. I have some concerns.
Do you remember the bill
major
that we
concern,
first voted on? Do you recall the bill that we voted on in 2014?
not off my head, no.
So the bill that we voted on and then put on the governor's desk that was vetoed, and we nearly overrode it. This is a different bill in some regards.
Well, no, I've read the bill. I have two concerns. One, my major concern is the situation we put our law enforcement in with this bill. That I come up with different scenarios in my mind that if you have, well, first of all, I would assume, I've never been a law enforcement officer in the state of Missouri, but when we sign we do our oath here in this chamber, we do it to uphold the Constitution of Missouri and the United States. Yes. I would assume law enforcement does something similar. Therefore, yes, this can create potentially a conflict of interest, because if this bill hits the Supreme Court, gets challenged in court, I believe the federal courts would rule this to be unconstitutional. I don't necessarily agree with them, but that could happen. I have concerns where I have a law enforcement officer, whether it be my county sheriff, one of the highway patrol guys down in our district, that gets put into a scenario where he has a conflict between this bill. I heard we have pretty good laws on the state of Missouri on lots of things, but in assisting, well, in a joint effort with federal agencies, where you're out doing something with law enforcement wise, and say a federal agent seizes a firearm, and it turns out that it is not correct. This is the person, wrong human being, wrong door, wrong name on search warrant, whatever the case be. I have concerns that somehow we can put our law enforcement at fear of doing their normal job, not intending to violate your right bill here, but because of the scenarios they're in with law enforcement and things are happening, and right. I would love Senator, to have a way to ensure that in those scenarios we don't get our law enforcement in trouble. Yeah, please respond.
So, and I had those concerns too, which is why the bill that left the House, this is not the same language, because after hours and hours and hours of meetings with every level of law enforcement, this is the language that we have come about to, and I would encourage you to look at, or to communicate with them, because this is language that they that they are now good with.
So you're telling me that all the law enforcement agencies are good with this language? There's nobody in opposition, none of the sheriffs, none of the...
Now, I can't speak for every individual. Right?
The organizations are all our police chiefs associations.
What I can say is, yes, what I can say is what I can say is that they have no longer any opposition to this language.
They're not supporting it, but they aren't speaking out against it, basically.
Right, they're not going to come out and endorse, but their concerns, by and large, were this is language that they know that no longer causes them to have any opposition to the bill.
Okay, I have gotten a little different feedback. To begin, having just seen this pretty recently, I got communications as late last week that the status of the bills were not where they liked them. Now, I don't know that that was dealing with this version. I know one of them did specifically mention the House version.
Yeah.
My other thing, and I don't know how it quite plays in, but I have a federal firearms license. I have a Curo and Rolex license. I am required by federal law to maintain a list of every single firearm I buy with my Curo and Rolex license.
Right.
Who I bought it from, when I bought it, where I bought it, if I dispose of it, because it's not a seller's license, it's a collector's license, where, who I've given it to, the date, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the serial numbers and all that are all out there. That does, I believe, again, the feds have to enforce that. I mean, and they do. Curo and Rolex, I keep my own books. They can at any time come to my house with, basically no notice and want to see my logbooks for what I have bought, what I've sold,
right.
and be able to account for every single thing. But
right. And are you saying that we should? Are you saying that because the bill is addressing what our local law enforcement is spending their time on, not federal.
It does address that, but it does, in the section, in 1420, the following federal acts shall be considered infringements on rights within the borders of the state of Missouri. I'm concerned again that if for some reason I am causing a trouble with, I'm saying, no, you can't come look at my guns anymore. You can't audit me because it's an infringement on my rights. This bill says that it is an infringement on my right for them to require taxes, license, registration of a sort, tracking definitely, and our local sheriff, because they pick him up on the way out. Again, my underlying concern, I don't disagree with what your bill wants to do. I totally support it. I guess I would like to hear
and also to be
good
clear,
reinsurance that we're not going to get law enforcement in trouble.
So to be clear, you're talking about language that says those provisions that would reasonably be expected to create a chilling effect.
Yeah, well, if you're saying that a registration is a chilling effect, I'm actually, I'm required to do that. And I don't know what a full 03, a regular federal firearms, a seller, I'm sure they have all sorts of tons of terrible paperwork. Mine's bad enough. But I tie that back in more to a concern somehow that a law enforcement officer of our local coming out with them can somehow end up being the target of a suit from another firearms license holder or somebody else, and not have that sovereign immunity. Hey, it's my job, and I guess my level of comfort is just the concern with putting our law enforcement at risk of getting sued, or our local police of getting hit for $50,000.
Right, gentlemen. I think that I'm going to go back to what the citizens are asking for. I think citizens are concerned. I don't know if you heard me speak before. I've never had more attention brought forward on this. People are terrified that there's movements and so I think it's time for us to make a bold stand. Now, you and I made a bold stand in I think it was 2013, 2014 when we put this.
I think it was 14.
And when we passed this, and that bill took a further stand. It asked our local law enforcement to actually arrest any federal agents that were doing this. I personally thought that was possibly the bridge too far, that created a conflict, which is why the bill that was filed this year did not do that. It was filed in the House as well. As the bill progressed through the House, they made provisions where they took out the provision in the bill that, because the bill had eliminated basically the immunity on the individual officer, okay? And that created a concern for law enforcement and their ability to be able to hire individuals, and so they decided to focus only on the agency, only on the department.
Okay, now,
I'm sorry.
I see that part too, but isn't the individual officer still liable? Or am I reading this wrong?
No, that's not correct.
Okay, he's not. Okay, I read this pretty quick, so I was
okay.
Moving along. So the individual officer is not going to be at risk for being sued by.
That's correct.
Somebody. It would be the agency that's hiring. Okay.
Yes.
I missed that click.
And as you probably know, they're used to being sued all the time for violating individual rights, and so this is not unusual.
Okay.
So we've taken away the concern of the individual officers, and that I think relieved a lot of law enforcement. But then by further making it clear, especially the provisions on the back of the bill, to make it clear that if you've got someone who's violating Missouri law, this is not a protection we want to extend to them. If you have someone that has violated firearms, or the way in which, if they have a fully automatic firearm, if they have fired inappropriately, if they've violated any of Missouri's firearm laws or drug possession laws, then we're not extending this protection to them. And that, I believe, really, really addressed the concerns of our law enforcement. And
Okay,
I think where the bill kind of returns to, which is a very bright line for local law enforcement, is that, and which is where they're at anyway, is they're simply focused on Missouri's laws, focused on Missouri firearm laws, and as long as a person isn't violating those laws, then that's not what they should be focused on.
Okay, so really on the page 6, where number sub 3 of 1.460, where it says sovereign immunity shall not be an affirmative defense in any action pursuant to this section. That is the section that's only dealing with agencies.
That's right.
So
That's correct.
technically, by your bill does not strip sovereign immunity out of the individual.
That's correct.
Okay, in my quick read, I had lost that part, so that makes me a little happier. Thank you.
Well, good. Thank you.
Further discussion, the senator from the 4th district.
I would like to inquire of the senator from the 20th.
Senator from the 20th, you yield.
Yes.
He does. Proceed.
Good evening, Senator.
Good evening.
I don't like your bill. So
Sorry?
I want to talk to you about it. I don't like it, so I want to talk to you about
Oh, well, I like you.
it. Well, I like you, I just don't like your bill. So let's just have this conversation about what we're trying to do here.
Okay.
So, you're trying to, why do you believe that you need to protect Second Amendment rights?
So as I mentioned before, history shows us that people and their liberties are threatened and their lives become threatened in nations that first start registering firearms, or not just firearms, but basically people's ability to defend themselves, and then they start creating restrictions, they start imposing expensive fees, all of those things. I don't know if you heard whenever I was walking through my opening.
What about in
of
Missouri?
all the times in history, so from the Ottoman Empire in 1915 to 17, they first started putting bans on possession of firearms, and eventually they killed 1.5 million Christians.
So you think,
And
so
then
you think,
all
hang on.
Sorry.
So you think that the government is going to restrict people's ability to have firearms and then come in and kill them?
It is.
I might have to agree with you on
I
some
know.
of that stuff.
You may not think that would happen, but I guarantee you that
I mean,
the
I
people
don't
that
know.
were living.
I know it has happened
I know.
to a certain segment of people, but let me ask you this question.
I think the people that were living in, for example, Uganda, during the 1970s, when they required them to register firearms.
Let me ask you this. Wait a minute, hold on. Are you aware that as of March the 31st of this year, it has been 126 mass shootings? And listen, 148 people dead and 481 injured, for a total of 629 total victims, some even including the shooters. Were you aware of that?
And all of that is tragic. And
It is tragic. Wait a minute.
What I'm saying is,
so you're saying,
are you aware that when governments seize firearms, the result is that over the last century, over 100 million people have been murdered by their own government.
well, listen.
By their own government.
I know, but you know, that's like, so
100
let me
million,
wait,
100
let me be
million
honest
is
to
not,
you.
is
Let me
not
be
even
honest
close to 100.
That's kind of, you know, I don't think right now that Missouri is in jeopardy of the government right now killing its citizens. I'm just going to, you know, put that out there. Just reality based. First of all. Second, I
Because-
don't
and
think, I
it's
think
because the
that we
citizens are
have,
armed.
I think that right now we have passed enough laxed gun laws right now that you are actually, this legislative body, where you're talking about infringing upon people's right to keep and bear arms, you have infringed upon the rights of citizens' safety.
I disagree.
Oh, why not? Why would you disagree with that?
Be-
Do you
because-
think that you have laxed the laws so bad that they have open carry. And so do you think that somebody walking in a store with a machine gun or whatever around his, because people are doing this, walking around with them because they have these
Right.
fanatic ideas about, you know, I'm going to be bold with it since the Missouri has allowed right to carry. So when I'm in this store and you come in with an automatic weapon, what should be going through my mind? At that point, should I say, oh, that's
What
just
you
a
should be
person
saying is, I'm
that's-
glad
they're-
that my colleagues are not restricted from carrying a firearm, and they're here to protect me.
Then you can't protect me. How are you
And
going to protect me?
Senator-
How is it? Hold on. This is my inquiry. Hang on. I just want to ask a question. I'm going to ask one question. I'm going to ask one question at a time. I'm going to let you answer.
Sounds good.
See, I'm going
If
to
you'll
be
let
like a
me-
lawyer, so
if
yes or
you'll
no
let
answer.
me answer.
How can you protect an individual in a grocery store when somebody walks in with an automatic weapon? I just want to know, how can you protect them?
By allowing citizens to carry.
And so you're saying all of those citizens pull out guns and just start shooting. What tragedy would that be?
Senator,
What happened to the children?
Senator, in
I just wanna know,
in places where a law-abiding citizen or a good guy with a firearm was able to be there, it's a good guy with a firearm that takes down the bad guy with a firearm.
Listen.
And I
are
want
you
them
try-
as-
are you-
I
so
want them
this
as
is-
prevalent
Do you
as possible.
understand? You remember the OK Corral? When they fight at the OK Corral? Remember, you
I've
know
seen
this?
I've seen the movies.
Okay. So if
Tombstone
we're
is a
talking
great
about history, what's, the famous movie, when Doc Holliday and them had the fight and they was restricting guns. That's true. Did you know that states had started to have people that were riding into the states to turn in their weapons because they were having so many shootouts? Do you know that history? That's why we started first with those gun regulations. So are you trying to
disagree
move
with
us
that.
back
I disagree with that. And
you
actually,
disagree with what?
Well,
It's history. You can read it. I can pull it up right now. You can read it.
Okay.
Texas was the first one
Okay.
that restricted guns in their borders.
I believe that they restricted. Yeah, the facts don't lie that they started restricting. Yes.
They started restricting guns. So how do you create a balance of infringing, you're talking about Second Amendment rights and the safety of individuals? The safety. Do you think an 80-year-old grandmother is going to be able to get out the way in a grocery store or the last bill I read somewhere around here floating around in this Capitol is you want to put guns on public transportation. So everybody got guns, nobody got anywhere to run, and one person pull out a gun. Why I won't pull out my gun and start
Senator,
shooting?
the facts do not lie that there are more violent crimes that occur in the more restrictive states than occur in the less restrictive states.
No.
Those facts don't lie.
Those facts are not. You saying, so this state is not a restrictive state, and I think it's ranked number one. They got a city right now that's ranked number one
Per
in
capita?
violent
No.
crimes right now in this state. How about that? Because of gun violence, homicides, we rank number one.
Senator, since 1986, the number of manufacturing of firearms and the distribution in the United States has tripled annually. It's tripled. It's gone up. And yet during that time,
Are you
per your
disputing that
logic, we would have more violent crime, more homicides, more gun
I'm trying to
murders.
figure out the necessity of
But
the bill.
it has nearly dropped in half.
So you're saying that right now in Missouri, what is the necessity of the bill? Why are we saying over here that you're giving police officers, what is this, $50,000?
Senator, because this is Missouri.
You're trying to you're penalizing police officers with $50,000 per occurrence.
Well, it's with the agency, with their department.
Well, that's going to cripple the department. I mean, so if
The-
police officers can't enforce federal gun laws, are you saying that our local police officers cannot enforce federal gun laws?
They've got enough laws to worry about. We have enough laws in the books for them to enforce.
Well, I'm trying to figure out
and
what
especially
what
for them to
oath
be
did you
focused
take?
on
What oath of office did you take? Because I'm trying to figure out, did we take the same oath of office?
I'm not following your logic because the Second Amendment is in the Constitution. I
It
took an
is,
oath
but
to uphold the
also
Second Amendment.
life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness too. And
That's-
if you and you
I'm
got
sorry,
to create
that's
a
not in the
balance.
Constitution.
You got to create a what does
Senator, that's not in the Constitution.
what?
Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness.
It's not. Where is it?
Senator, that's in the Declaration of Independence.
Okay, well, that's the Declaration of Independence. Okay.
And we don't take an oath to that. It's a
We don't
beautiful
take oath to
document,
that.
but we
It's
don't
a
take an
beautiful
oath.
document. We won't take oath to that.
We don't
but-
pledge an oath to the
But
Declaration.
do you think that you're basing the Second Amendment on the founders' ideology? Because I don't believe machine guns were around when the founders did this ideology. I don't believe assault weapons were around when they did this ideology. So, and when you're talking about an armed militia, they were talking about,
Senator,
military to protect.
I can-
Your idea of what a militia
and
is
I'm happy
different
to
from my idea of what a militia is.
I understand, and I'm happy to requote what I said before and what the founders said. But if you read it, and especially from the perspective of these individuals who had just had their own government attempt to take their lives, they all knew they might be hung. That's what when they signed the Declaration of Independence, they said we'll probably be hung together, right? They had their own government coming after them. These individuals, believe me, I mean, if you can imagine being in their position, they absolutely understood the impact of having their own government take away their life, their rights, and their liberties, which is why.
Oh, I have a government right now. They're still trying to take away rights and liberties.
Well, then
This
you should be
government-
supportive of
No, I
this.
shouldn't be supportive of that, though. But
They're
they're still
the
taking
Second
away
Amendment
rights
is
and
what
liberties.
secures all the other rights. Without that, it's easily to use
Well,
force
let
to
me ask
take
you
away
this.
free speech.
So you're in favor of supporting the Constitution, right? This is about the Constitution. I'm just asking, is this about the Constitution?
I support the Constitution.
You support everything that's in the Constitution?
I could see the Socratic method.
Huh?
Please continue.
I'm asking. I mean, you talking about the Constitution. We're having this.
we
but
support-
listen, we got to balance the scales. You saying infringing upon Second Amendment rights, but I think the Constitution has a unstated mandate of safety for its citizens, and every citizen is not going to, have a whole lot of guns or bear arms or take guns with them everywhere they go. They want to. That's why they have what they call the armed militia, the ones that protect the free state, the police officers or the military, That's why, we have this in the United States, this umbrella of freedom that we're under. But while you're talking about the Constitution, I want to talk about, are you for Medicaid expansion? Because that's in the Constitution.
I will fund Medicaid expansion to every penny that they put in the Constitution to fund it.
Well,
So
I think they've already funded it.
Every dime that they appropriated in the budget in the Constitution, I'm happy to.
I think we've
that
already, well, I'm
for every
glad you
dime-
said that. I'm glad you said that because we have received enough money
So every-
actually to where we won't realize any cost, at least for the next 5 years. So if we're not going to realize the cost for the next 5 years, I think that we should do it. And then afterwards, we can send it back to the people and say, well, we're waiting on them to send us the rest of the money. I mean, I'm just saying. But thank you for the inquiry. I want to,
Thank you,
Mr.
Senator.
President, can I inquire of the senator from the 9th? No,
Senator from the
Come on.
Senator from the 9th District, you yield to an inquiry from your colleague of the 4th District.
Yes, sir. Yes,
She
sir.
does. Proceed.
Senator, I'm just having a hard time, with these, I don't know what to call them. I'm trying to find the right word to call these, it's a diversion from reality for me. Because, we talking about, I'm looking at all of these mass shooting, all of these automatic weapons, and I'm looking at all of these grieving parents whose children have died from homicides because of the, you know, the weakened gun laws we have here and the imbalance in the gun laws.
Senator, what's interesting, what you're saying is, I heard you in the previous inquiry, you mentioned how Missouri may be #1 this year, but what we do know for a fact from the CDC is that the state of Missouri was #1 in gun deaths in 2019, 3 times the national rate for African American people, and we didn't have one mass shooting.
Wow.
We're able to kill more people with guns in Missouri with no mass shootings.
Wow.
And
that is upsetting.
And these numbers have gone up exponentially since 2007, when we stopped saying that you had to have a background check and that you needed a license before purchasing guns.
Exactly.
And this bill will say anybody can have a gun.
Anybody can have a gun.
And in fact, it says something that I actually like as a criminal defense attorney, and it says that any federal acts, laws, executive orders that infringe on the people's right to keep and bear arms as guaranteed by the Second Amendment shall be invalid to this state and shall not be recognized to this state. And it says that even if they were enacted before, if we were to pass this bill. So what that would mean to me is we just go around to the prisons, and if you're in there for gun possession, we let you out. Right. And since the majority of those people are people of color, then we let them out and we let them have their gun again. Because there's the federal law that says if you're a felon, you can't have another gun. So we let all our felons continue to have guns.
Right. Well, I mean, you know, like I said, I am so confused by the ideology and the logic, because when you have an imbalance, when you're trying to protect one right, you infringe upon another right, you know. And it amazes me, what really amazes me too is, you know, and I might have to go back to the senator from the 20th too, because, you know, in the word it says if you live by the sword, you're going to die by the sword. So to me that means if you live by the gun, you're going to die by the gun.
I agree.
If you live by faith, see, that's what we're supposed to be doing. And if you believe what it says, you would just look at Galatians 1:4 when he said, I have already delivered you from the evil of this present age because it is my will concerning you. And then you'll have to go over to Job 1:38. You know what I'm saying? When he was talking about, you know, the power of the word of God, where it was so powerful that it kept the sea in its bowels. You get what I'm saying?
Yes, ma'am.
So when you're talking about the power of the word and what it will do to protect you, that's the faith. That's the walking by faith. That's saying I'm on the foundation of the word, which is a solid foundation. So it confuses me sometimes, you know, when we pass certain legislation and we are required to protect our citizens, but yet and still we're offering them no protection.
None at all.
No protection.
Because while the Second Amendment does say the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, there is nothing in the Second Amendment that gives you the right to infringe upon those who don't want to be around your bared arms.
Exactly.
There's nothing in the Second Amendment that says it's okay to take your values and impose those upon those people so that they don't even know they're safe.
That's right.
There's nothing in the Second Amendment that said anybody can have them anytime, do whatever you want to with the guns, because then that's when they created those things called criminal laws.
Exactly. There is nothing. And so I think that we take an unrealistic look or an unrealistic approach to the Second Amendment. And I really think that this is a solution in search of a problem, because we don't have one. Especially in the state of Missouri.
I think to take such a narrow view of the Constitution
would
mean people like me and you wouldn't even be here today.
Exactly.
People like the senator from the 4th, the senator from the 14th wouldn't be here today.
Wouldn't be here
None
today.
of the 11 record-breaking women that are standing in this Senate today would be here if we continue to take such a narrow view of the Constitution.
Exactly.
In fact, many of the men in here wouldn't be in here today because they didn't own enough land.
That's right.
Didn't have enough property.
Exactly.
So if we're going to continue to take that narrow view, let's take the narrow view.
Exactly.
And let's just throw it all out, throw the baby out with the water. Or let's look at the reality of the Constitution growing, hence those things called the amendments themselves.
The
because
amendments
if they
themselves.
thought about it in the beginning, it wouldn't have been an amendment in the first place.
There has to have been an amendment in the first place. And when you're talking about one right, you can't infringe upon somebody else's right. I mean, just like you want to bear arms, but this person may not want to bear arms.
Correct.
I mean, in the United States, you have that right not to bear arms.
And you
I
have the right
to be safe.
To be safe.
That's exactly it. I have that right to be safe. And you don't have a right to make me unsafe because you want to bear your arms. Bear your arm. Put your guns in your closet on your shelf. What? You get me? This is unnecessary.
I'm even okay, put your guns in your car, put your guns where you go. But you should not have the right to infringe upon other people who's, as a matter of fact, I think one of the issues would be they can take them on the bus. Where in my community, a lot of the people that ride the bus are physically disabled.
Physically disabled.
So when you decide with your itchy finger that you may want to shoot, they may not have the ability to save themselves.
But they can anyway. There's nowhere to run on the bus. There's nowhere to run on the bus.
And we shouldn't put their safety at issue. Because what this does is it puts one person's rights over the rights of another. And we went through the amendments in our country so that we are supposed to all be equal in our rights.
Right. And so, and then, I don't understand. See, it's a balance. And this right here is concerning me because, I mean, like I said, I don't think it's necessary. And, especially when you're trying to find police departments for enforcing federal law.
And that's confusing just a little bit to me, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later in the day, but we were just here giving the police officers Bill of Rights. we just did that here in this wonderful, amazing room that I'm honored to serve the people of my state.
Well, I'm very...
And now we're saying, if you follow your job to protect and serve, you lose your official immunity. Of course, you don't lose it if you accidentally, on purpose, go beyond normal force and use excessive force and kill somebody. You don't lose it for that.
You don't lose it with that.
But
because
if you are
that's
trying
right.
to actually stop a crime from going on, done your investigation, sometimes the only way you're going to know how to find the criminals is because you worked with the feds because they have more resources. You can't do that anymore. And if you do, to actually make a community safer, I'm going to fire you. You can no longer work as a peace officer in the state of Missouri, and you're going to pay for all the costs and fines.
Exactly. And you
lose your immunity if something happens. So what that also does, I'm sorry, Senator, I just want to add this other little thing, is what that also does is when you lost that immunity, the very criminals that you as an officer were trying to stop get to sue you personally, get to sue your agency because they no longer have any official immunity from actually doing their job, so we're going to cost them extra money. Exactly. And the criminal gets to go free, keep carrying his gun and doing whatever he wants to.
But I'm trying to figure out which one. I'm trying to figure out if is the Department of Public Safety in favor of this bill? Has the Sheriff's Association in favor of this bill? Is the troopers in favor of this bill? Is the Fraternal Order of Police in favor of this bill? It's amazing me I haven't heard from any of them in reference to this bill, because I think this is crazy. No offense. This is crazy. But another thing too is it was just total silence. You have this contradictory thing going on in the country now. 1 minute, you want to wave the flag, for police, and then in the next minute, during the insurrection, you want to take that same blue flag and beat one to death. I mean, this is what they call, this is 2 Timothy. I'm going to read it if I can find it right now, because this is the craziness that we're dealing with right now. This is what we're dealing with in our country, and I'm going to try to find it because it is people I don't think that we should be able to infringe. We have to create a balance between individuals' right to bear arms and an individual's right to safety. And if we don't create that balance, because we're here to balance the scales of justice, and I think that we are failing in that instance when we pass legislation like this, because this is, I think, is putting. We're already trying to bridge relationships between law enforcement and community. We're trying to do criminal justice reform. We're trying to reestablish the roles of the entities. You know, the police officers defining of protecting and serving, you know, versus the community's right also to safety, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is, you know, is a, you know, wasn't in the Constitution, but at the same time, you know, is definitely what the Constitution was basically principled on. Freedom, free market.
Yes.
Free to believe what you need to believe. So it's this passage, I'm trying to find it because, I mean, it's really interesting to me. I think it might be 3. Let's see. It says, you know, this is it. This always amazes me because, you know, this is so true. It says, Paul was talking to Timothy. He said, in the last days, perilous times shall come, for men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying the power thereof. So, you know, if I read that in another translation, which I probably like better, it says, the last days there will be very difficult times, for people will love only themselves and their money. Wow. They will be boastful and proud, scoffing at God, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful. They will consider nothing sacred. They will be unloving and unforgiving. They will slander others and have no self-control. They will be cruel and hate what is good. They will betray their friends, be reckless, be puffed up with pride, and love pleasure rather than God. They will act religious, but they will reject the power that can make them godly. Stay away from people like that. And when I think about some of the things that we do in our legislative body, I think about those last days, those end times, because we get so far from what I consider realistic reality, you know, and, you know, like the Second Amendment to the Constitution needs actually protecting, and to say that having sensible gun laws is infringing upon that Constitution is really broad and in no effect to me, because you have to consider the safety of individuals who walk around every day, people's ability to, you know, shop, people's ability to walk down the street, walk their dog. You know, I remember when they first passed this law of open carry. I remember in front of the police station, you had an individual that kept walking up and down the street in front of the police station, armed to the tilly with assault weapons and bullets and assault weapons. And I was saying to myself, now, why is this person walking up and down the street in front of the police? Well, you know, now I can open carry, I can freely carry, and I dare them to do something about it. I dare them to do something about it. But at the same time, that was a threat to them.
And I'm not even sure if we as a body understand that the bearing of arms in and of itself, and how you bear them, and how you hold them, and how you may point them, without discharging a bullet is in and of itself the crime of assault. Because if you put that fear in me and threatened me with a gun by pointing it at me, oh my God, there are people like Tamar Rice who may have had a toy gun that someone thought someone pointed at him and lost his life, right?
Lost his life. Oh my God.
Dang. And then there are people who had cell phones
That's
that
right.
they thought was a gun.
And they lost their
And
life.
they lost their life.
But what about the people that didn't have no gun?
None at all.
None at all.
But
and
I
lost their
don't
life.
believe that it is understood that when you give me the right to bear arms, and in the state of Missouri, I ain't even really got to do nothing to get one. I can just go get a gun.
Just go get
and
one.
this bill is going to make it worse because, again, we were just here trying to give our police officers more tools to do their jobs better so that we would stop being the #1 state in the nation with gun violence for African Americans and one of the top 10 states for gun violence in general, one of the top 10 states for suicide by gun. So we're trying to give our officers more tools, but this bill says, let me see, where did I see that? There was something strange about this bill that says, they can't aid federal agents at all, but you can take the federal government's money, though. You can do that. And then you can't have the guns registered or tracked.
Exactly.
So that at least you can't use the federal government in that assistance. So I, like you, live on the borders of our state. So if you can buy a gun with no restrictions in Kansas City and take it across the street, because that's all it is where I live, across the street to Kansas, and shoot somebody or threaten somebody or hit somebody with it, our officers are going to be in a much more difficult situation to solve those crimes if this bill were to pass, because you couldn't do anything to track that gun in the first place.
That's right. That was my point exactly. We will be unable to solve crimes in Missouri in reference to guns and being able to track those guns. It's essential. If you're a law-abiding citizen and you want to bear arms, I don't understand what's the secrecy. Why you don't want your gun tracked? Why wouldn't you want somebody to know you got the gun? Wouldn't you want to register the serial number? You're a law-abiding citizen. How is that infringing upon your right to bear arms? You can buy 50 of them, but we need to know that you the one with the 50.
I can't buy Sudafed without it being tracked.
Right, I can't buy Sudafed. They asked for my driver's license just to get pseudoephedrine. You get me? So come on now, really? This is what we're doing? And this upsets me really. This doggone page 6 is really getting to me. But it says, any political subdivision or law enforcement agent that employs a law enforcement officer who acts knowingly as defined under this section to violate the provisions or otherwise knowingly deprive the state of Missouri of the rights and privileges ensured in the Second Amendment of the Constitution of the United States, Article 1, whatever, Constitution of Missouri, while acting under color of any state or federal law shall be liable to the injured party in the action at the law. That's too much.
And again, where we live on the edges, everybody who lives on the borders, this bill would prevent them not only because you're telling them they can't do anything with the federal law, but anytime you cross the state line, you have to deal with the federal law to continue to work. So if I'm in the bottom of the state and I want to work with the Oklahoma officers or the Arkansas officers or the Tennessee officers, I can't even do that to continue to fight a crime and get investigation, because I have to have federal laws that would allow me to do that, to do that interstate compact. But we can't do that anymore. So basically Missouri is saying what you should do, all people who want to shoot and kill people, come on to Missouri.
Come on to
Get
Missouri.
you a gun.
Get
Get
you
as
a
many
gun.
as you want. Nobody's going to trace them.
Nobody's
go
gonna
back
trace it.
wherever it is, whichever it is you want to go to. Shoot up
Exactly.
everybody and everything you want to do and go back to work the next day because we will not bother you.
We will not bother you. That's exactly what this bill is saying. We will not bother you. And it's just awful. And I think, I was getting ready to say something, but I done lost it now.
While you catching that, on the flip side, I come from a country family. I totally understand the need to bear arms. I myself now live in an urban community where there's gun violence. So I get that. Everyone should have that right. But you don't have the right to come in my house or come in my church or go on my bus with a gun without me knowing that that's there.
Exactly.
Because if we are to treat others like we want to be treated.
Let me tell you. I got this thought. So this bill is also creating something, that I think may be unintended, because we are the United States. And United States came together and created the federal government. This is the United States. So now Missouri is saying that they don't want to be a part of the federal laws that's supposed to impact. So what we're saying now is we don't want to be a part of those laws of the federal government that impact the state. So now are we severing ourselves from the federal government? Are we no longer a part of the United States? You get what I'm saying? This is a broader conversation. Because right now you're saying, I'm bucking at that. Are we disrespecting, all of the people that the citizens have elected to represent on the federal level? This is the conversation that we're having right now. This is a broader conversation, because this bill does more than just put our law enforcement officers in a bad position and infringe on the safety rights of some of our citizens without a clear balance. That's why it was conceal and carry. Yes, that was an extension. It doesn't infringe upon the Second Amendment to say, yes, you can have firearms, just conceal them, carry them, so that you won't frighten the old lady in the store, in the grocery store, or frighten the child that's coming in that you got a gun. Conceal it so that the law enforcement, then we have it where law enforcement can't tell the difference between law-abiding citizens and criminals. I mean, you're creating a Wild Wild West scenario. So if that's the case, what's the purpose of the part of the Second Amendment that says, the militia, the free militia, that's part of the Second Amendment.
There's another part of the Constitution that says a state can't form its own militia for war without permission from the federal government.
And so if we're going to, get rid of that part and sever our ties with the federal government, I think this is have some very strong constitutional problems in this legislation. And, it says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. So if we are doing this legislation is actually preventing us, from actually following the Constitution in itself. Because what you're saying is the state of Missouri can't enforce federal gun laws. So in one instance, you want to uphold the Constitution, Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and in the second part, you want to say, well, we're not going to enforce the laws of the second. So it's contradictory. The bill in itself is contradictory.
It is, because it says don't help with the federal.
Right.
Don't apply those laws. Don't help with the feds.
Right.
Because you're subject to losing your job, losing your immunity, paying $50,000, and then it also says, but then it's not a violation if you help them pursue a suspect with another state or country, and but the suspect can't be a citizen in Missouri and can't be present in Missouri. So as long as and it don't take long for me to establish residency in Missouri. So again, I can come from Uganda and stay here, get some mail mailed to me, go register to vote, become a citizen, you know, because I might have been a citizen, I just came back. And as long as I go across the street again, then you can't participate in that.
Exactly.
And I don't think that there's an understanding that when you say it shall not be considered a violation of these sections to provide material aid to federal prosecution for felony crimes, I don't think there's the understanding that before we get to the quote-unquote prosecution, because that really doesn't happen until I issue a warrant for your arrest and we file some charges and maybe go to the grand jury.
Hey, file no
I
charges.
need to be working with folks. I need to work with the other states. I need to work with the federal governments to do the investigation to make the determination if you are, in fact, someone who has committed a felony crime.
Exactly.
But I can't do that under this.
You can't do that under this. And you're removing all the laws that are the tools that give the officers the ability to do their job in reference to guns. And if you want to bring down the gun violence, first of all, we got to deal with the underlying causes, but at the same time, you're taking away the police officers' ability because you're saying they can't enforce federal gun laws, and you've weakened the state of Missouri gun laws.
And the other
Weakened
thing
them.
we're doing is we're subjecting them and interfering with their safety as well. Just thought about that. Because
That's
if
right.
I'm not able to work with the feds, and let's say I have a warrant I want to issue and possibly go to a house, I can't even find out from the feds
Yes.
if there's someone in there that may endanger my life with a gun. Can't find out from my other states if that person happened to come from another state because we didn't even track it.
Exactly.
We don't have any record. We don't know.
Exactly.
We don't know if there's a dangerous person in there. So not only am I going to take your ability to do your job away, I'm taking your life and liberty possibilities away as well. And I'm
Exactly.
pretty sure that nothing in the Constitution was meant to say, just get out there and be willy-nilly, and we're not going to protect you.
Right. And this is, I mean, you know, I'm just, I keep thinking about this. And like I said, I've read it several times. And I don't like the language, you know, of the bill. And I've tried to say, okay, maybe this is good, thank you. Maybe this is good and maybe that's good, but nothing is. I mean, this is you know, and then, you know, I like to, you know, I love, you know, he was talking about the article of independence, but, you know, the preamble to the Constitution says, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, and I love that word union, that's forming a union, establish justice. I want to know what ensure domestic tranquility means. You get me?
Yes,
Because
ma'am.
if we're going to ensure some domestic tranquility, we're going to have a balance between, you know, what he considers Second Amendment rights and people infringing upon the safety of others. You know, we're supposed to provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. And so, if we are to do that, you know, we're going to have to regulate guns, because there is
It
no
also
way
says
in
in
the
that
world
preamble,
that you're going to secure the blessings of liberty without regulating some guns. And again, the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, does not mean that you cannot have common sense gun laws to regulate guns. in Missouri or in America or in anywhere else. And I think this is this is not even a solution, and there is not a problem. What you have done in Missouri is weaken the gun laws, and now you're trying to weaken law enforcement's ability to enforce federal gun laws, which is making it more unsafe for the citizens of Missouri. Unsafe, especially when you have parts of this state that are high in homicide rates. And I was just looking at one city that I couldn't even pronounce in the state of Missouri, who was on that mass shooting list. And I was trying to, and we're talking about the people who are victims of gun violence. Victims of gun violence. But if you look at this one area, I know it's others in Missouri. It's called Koshkonong, Missouri. This happened on April 10th.
How you spell that, Senator?
You spell that Koshkonong. Koshkonong.
K-O-S-H, say that again, please.
Kosh. Koning. This just happened on April the 10th. A man shot several people at a convenience store. This happened. The motive was unclear. 1 dead, 3 injured, 4 victims. And so what was that? So now, since you got these open gun laws, people walking in convenience stores and grocery stores, you don't know the intent of those individuals. You don't know what you want this free range of guns. That means that nobody can feel safe. You want to desensitize me. So that means that when I'm walking in a gun store, I'm going to have to and when I'm walking in a grocery store, since you've lowered the standards in the state of Missouri, I don't have the police protection. Now that means every time I go to the grocery store, I'm gonna have to have an automatic weapon or something in my hand, because now you got open carry and you wanna let everybody walk around anywhere, in any place with a gun. So that means every time somebody comes in the store with a gun on, I have to discern their intent. I can no longer take my kids with me because I don't know if somebody's gonna break out shooting.
And the snappy mark where it happened cannot tell you, according to our laws in Missouri, that you can't come in with your gun.
Exactly.
I own this. I might have my children there. It's my store.
Exactly.
It's my property.
Exactly.
But I'm not allowed to tell you, because it's open to the public, that you can't come in with your gun.
Exactly.
And shoot me.
Exactly.
For whatever reason.
For whatever reason.
The fact that my
And
last name might be
don't want any
Marino.
background checks, no mental health checks. So therefore, I don't know if you're having a mental breakdown. You woke up this morning. We've had all these mass shootings. These people have decided to commit suicide. But before they decided that, they said, well, let me take about 20 people with me.
And the ancillary effects of some of this is we catch someone like the man in Koshkonong, and or whatever it's called, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful if they're listening. Then it's going to cost our taxpayer dollars, because he's going to be in jail for the rest of his life.
Exactly.
Or even if he goes to death row 20, 30 years, over 25, 30 years.
Exactly.
And we're going to feed him and house him and provide him services, and I'm not saying he doesn't deserve all of that, but maybe if we had a mental health check, he wouldn't have got a gun in the first place. Now, I'm not saying he has a mental health problem, but it is not normal behavior in the state, in any place, to just walk in a store and shoot 4 people.
Yeah.
Something was going on there.
And I believe the senator, has I don't understand the belief system that the Second Amendment is in jeopardy.
Well, Senator,
That's not reality
there
to
are
me.
those who believe it's been in jeopardy since Obama came to office, and they, they said that he was going to take the guns, and the man has been in office, out of office, out here writing books, hair is white, and ain't nobody came to take nobody gun yet.
You
So-
would not, you would not believe when we were in this body. I think when I got elected, I think it was 2011, and I can't remember the scope of the legislation, but in the legislation, it said that no law that basically that was passed by the federal government shall Missouri, it was the same as this, basically saying that Missouri should, enforce those laws. So I inquired of the individual who had the piece of legislation. I say, it amazes me that we have this one line in here that says that Missouri shall not, enforce or be obligated to enforce or whatever any law that's passed by the federal government. And I said, why is it now that we wanted this legislation? And this legislation was bold enough to say because Obama was in office. He said, we're not going to pass any legislation because Obama was in office. And then they, and when you think about...
But they took Obama's budget money, didn't they?
Oh, they took all the budget money.
They ride on the federal highways that continue to be funded by Obama, don't they?
That's right. You do what I'm saying?
They kids take grants and loans
Right.
for college that are funded by Obama and
That's
now
right.
Biden or the federal government. So my
Exactly.
thing is, if we're going to say we don't want to abide by the laws, let's just go and do it. Let's secede from the union, give them everything back.
Exactly. Pay the debt. Exceed from the union. Pay the debt.
Don't take a dime.
Don't take
We
another
are
dime.
getting ready to get what, $300-400 million.
Right. And then see what giant is going to come in and take over little old Missouri. What other foreign company going to come pick off Missouri? You know what I'm saying?
We
That's
can't
why
even
that's why
can't even grow by 5% over 10 years.
Exactly. That's why we have created the United States. It was a principle behind creating the United States. And so, this, like I said, this ideology that the Second Amendment is threatened is ludicrous. Ludicrous. And in a country and in a state right now that's violent, more violent than any other state, you want to now relax the laws, the gun laws, and then penalize officers for enforcing the gun laws. This is ludicrous, and the fanaticism. That's why I read 2 Timothy, because see, you have fanaticism that will actually vote for this. You have fanaticism that believes this, and that's what he was talking about in 2 Timothy. They're going to deviate their minds. You got me? Got an appearance or a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge. Not understanding the power. It says denying the power thereof. That's what we're talking about. This is an example. This is an example of that fanaticism. What I call a deviation from realism or right thinking. Because this is amazing to me. So this legislation is something else. So you know what, Senator? I'm not done inquiring, but I'm going to inquire of the senator from, let me see, I want to mess around with the senator from Lawrence, because he wanted me to inquire of him so much. So, thank you for the inquiry. Mr. President, I want to inquire from the senator from Lawrence. He want to go toe-to-toe with me for some reason, and I don't understand why. But, I'm going to engage.
Senator from the 4th, are you seeking recognition?
Yes, Mr. President. Can I inquire of the senator from Lawrence?
Senator from Lawrence, do you yield?
Jointly.
He does. Proceed.
Senator, I don't even know what to ask you. Because, I'm trying to figure out where do we meet, on this legislation.
Senator, have you ever eaten at a Luby's restaurant?
Say that again.
Have you ever eaten at a Luby's?
At a Luby's?
You know what a Luby's is?
No.
Luby's is a a restaurant down in Texas. And I don't really think it's anything special. I've eaten there one time, but I've heard lots of stories about it. And I have a story if you'd be interested in hearing it.
Tell me a story. I'm listening.
I'll tell you. There was a lady named Susan Gracia. I didn't realize it when I heard her story first, but she's a chiropractor. 1991, she's testifying in front of the Congress, U.S. Congress. She says this, and if you wouldn't mind, I'll just read this so I won't get it all wrong. She said, in 1991, on a beautiful October day, my parents and I went to a local cafeteria to have lunch with a friend of mine who was managing the cafeteria. It was Boss's Day, the day after payday, so the place was packed. We were unable to sit in our usual position by the front window. And as we finished lunch and my friend got up to check on things in the kitchen, this pickup truck came crashing through the floor to the ceiling window where we normally sat. It came to rest about 15 feet from us, that's the truck did, after knocking over a number of tables and injuring several people. Of course, we all thought it was an accident, and I began to rise up to help some people that the truck had knocked over. But as I began to stand up, we heard gunshots. Immediately, my dad and I got down on the floor to help turn the table up in front of us. Mom got down behind us. I continued to hear shooting on the opposite side of the truck. Remember this was 1991, and this type of mass shootings we have seen since we were, I'm going to read that again. Remember, this was 1991, and this type of mass shootings we have seen since were not yet occurring on a regular basis. So this was kind of an unusual thing down there in Texas. I kept waiting for him to say something like, everybody put up your wallets on the table. But the gunshots continued, and it took about 45 seconds, which is an eternity, to realize that he was just there to execute people. As he made his way around from the front of the truck, I watched as he leveled his gun on the head of a person crouched beneath him, pulled the trigger. Then he calmly walked to the next person, pointed the gun, pulled the trigger. It was then that I thought, I've got him. Now this is a young woman now. I've got him, she said. I reached for my purse on the floor next to me. I had a perfect place to prop up my shooting hand, and I've hit much smaller targets at much greater distances. Could I have missed? It's possible, but it sure would have changed the odds. Then I realized that a few months earlier I'd made the stupidest decision of my life. I'd begun to leave my gun in my car because at the time in the state of Texas, concealed carry laws didn't exist. I was concerned about getting caught with it. I did what most normal people do. I wanted to obey the law and certainly didn't want to lose my license to practice my livelihood. I never thought I'd need it in the middle of a crowded restaurant. I remember looking around for something to use as a weapon and thinking, great, what do I do now? Throw a salt shaker at him? I can't begin to get across to you how incredibly frustrating it is to sit there like a fish in a barrel and wait for it to be your turn with no help of defending yourself. It was then, she said, that my father took my attention. He began to rise up and said, I've got to do something. I've got to do something or he's going to kill everyone in here. I turned to him and tried to hold him down by the shirt collar, she said, but when he saw what he thought was a chance, he stood up and ran at the guy, who at that point was about a dozen feet from us. The gunman had complete control of the room, and he simply turned, shot my father in the chest. My father fell in the aisle about 7 or 8 feet from me, and although he was alive and still conscious, I saw the wound. It was awful. And she said, I didn't want to think this, but I wrote him off. She thought he was dead. The good news is that event made the gunman change direction slightly, and he went off to my left, and this was the first time I'd gotten a good look at him. He was 30-something years old, tall, and I remember wondering what could be so terribly wrong in this man's life that he would be committing this horrible act. At that point, I heard another window crash toward the back of the restaurant and thought, oh my God, here he comes, another one. But when I looked, I realized that something had broken out a window at the back of the restaurant where people were pouring out through it. I peeked over the top of the upturned table, and when the gunman's back was to me, I stood up, grabbed my mother by the shirt collar, and said, come on, let's go. We've got to get out of here. And then my feet grew wings. I was one of the only ones from that front area to make it out of the back window. As I stumbled through the broken window, I ran to my manager friend who had come out the side door of the kitchen, and he said, thank God you're all right. Yeah, but my dad's been hit, she told him, and it's bad. Then I turned to say something to my mom and realized she hadn't followed me out because it was glass about 3/4 of the way around the restaurant. I couldn't see the interior due to the backlighting, and I had no idea where my mother was. In the interest of time, I'll spare you the details of the next several minutes, she says. However, I'll tell you that several of the first responders were patients of mine because she was a chiropractor. A week or so after the event, they took me and my siblings to lunch and filled in some of the gaps. They told us that they'd been in a conference at a hotel one building away when the shooting occurred. In an odd twist of gun control fate, the manager of the hotel told them to leave their weapons in their vehicles so that they wouldn't make their customers uncomfortable. So precious minutes were lost as they retrieved their weapons from the locked trunks and made their way back to the restaurant. They told us that they worked their way through the broken window. They weren't sure who the gunman was, but they saw a lot of bodies and a woman. I'm just trying to imagine what this would have been like. A woman on her knees in the aisle, cradling a mortally wounded man. That man walked up to her. She looked up at him. He put his gun to her head. She looked down at her husband. He pulled the trigger. That's how they knew who the gunman was. And they all they had to do was fire one shot in the ceiling. And you know what that weak-kneed, spineless individual of a gunman who took all these people, these innocent people, and shot them in the head, you know what he did? He ran to the back into a restroom. I don't have to tell you the rest of it, because what if this woman had have disobeyed and taken her handgun into the restaurant, shot one in the ceiling, or maybe one in him? It would have been done, because all it took was one shot, and this guy ran like a spineless rat that he was. And I tell you,
Let me tell you something.
Senator,
that was 30 years ago. And Missouri still...
It was 30 years ago. That's exactly right.
And Missouri,
but it could have been today.
And
it could have been yesterday.
Missouri has conceal and carry laws already. Matter of fact, you don't have to conceal and carry. We already have open carry laws. So I'm still trying to figure out what this legislation has to do with that. And then you got a story. Let me read you a story.
Okay,
Let me read you a story. You want to talk about, and I ain't even got to read a story. Let me tell you about a lady who was driving down the street in the neighborhood. And because, you know, we don't do gun checks, and you talking about that person and that thing, if we would have had gun checks like mental health checks and things like that to see if people are mentally able to have a gun, that probably could have been avoided too. But since we don't want to allow that because we think it's an infringement upon the Second Amendment right, we infringed upon the safety of those people, because if we would have had better gun checks, I bet that person probably wouldn't have had a gun. But anyway, we're going to talk about this, just driving down the street. In my neighborhood, somebody I know leaving her family's home, just driving down the street. Two idiots in a car shooting at each other across the street. Just pow, 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 pow. She in her car just got shot. Them individuals, Wild Wild West, they can't shoot. How do you shoot that? They shooting at each other, running down the street. That person died. What about, I can tell you on the corner.
Is it a white neighborhood?
2 weeks ago.
Is it a white neighborhood?
It's not a white neighborhood.
Okay, because if you'll allow me, I've got something else that I think would just blow your socks off.
But that ain't got nothing to do with it.
Yes, it does.
No,
oh, it
hold
sure
on.
does. Yeah,
Listen,
it does.
we can trade gun stories all day.
This isn't a gun story.
But we can trade gun stories
Not
all
a gun
day.
story. Nope.
But that does not solve a crime of infringing upon the safety of others when you're trying to, you know, bear arms and all of that. You could talk about that. I could tell you last weekend on the corner where a little kid was shot because some idiots was shooting out of a car window with an automatic weapon. Why do we have automatic weapons in the urban areas?
Was it
Automatic
an
weapons are
automatic?
for war.
What kind of weapon was it?
It was an automatic weapon.
Tell me, describe the weapon. What kind of weapon was it?
I haven't looked at the thing, but it was an automatic weapon. That's what it said, an automatic weapon.
That's interesting.
You know, but you can have a 15 clip,
Yeah,
whatever. It
yeah.
doesn't matter.
And are
a
those-
machine gun, most of them are machine
Are
guns
those legal?
or automatic weapons.
Are they legal?
Yeah. You've tied the hands of the police, so the police ain't. They not even going after
So
guns.
those are criminals, right?
You know what
and
I'm saying?
and they've got automatic weapons. They're not legal, and so that's part of what we need to take care of. This bill is allowing people to own legal
This bill
guns.
is allowing the Missouri to separate from the laws of the federal government. This bill is punishing our police officers for enforcing federal laws. This bill is contradictory to federal government. This bill is contradictory to the Constitution itself. In 1 minute you want to uphold the Constitution, and the next minute you want to not do it. This
How
bill
is this in violation of the Constitution?
That's what it is.
Where in the Constitution do you find that this violates the Constitution? I would really, if you
You
can
want to
point
know
it
where
out.
this bill says in violation of the Constitution?
Tell me where it violates it. Yeah.
First of all, you want to, in this bill, it says, and we're supposed to, currently federal law supersedes state law.
Where? How do you get that? Tell me in this Constitution where it says that federal law supersedes state law.
So what are you saying? You're saying that
The
you
supremacy clause?
cannot state law pass no law to overturn a federal law on the state level. Am I correct? Answer the question. Am I correct?
You're telling me that
Can you pass a state law to overturn a federal law?
any law that I'm going to answer this
We
way.
can expand upon
No.
federal law, but we cannot change federal law.
You're talking about the supremacy clause. It says any law that is passed in pursuance thereof of the U.S. Constitution is supreme law of the land. So if the federal government passes a law and it violates the U.S. Constitution, it's invalid.
That's not the question. I'm not talking about the federal law and the federal law. That's not the question.
Okay, well, you
I'm talking
asked
about
me-
the state and the feds.
Okay, well, to rephrase your question in a different way so maybe
No,
I
I
can
don't need to
understand.
rephrase it because you understand it.
Well, tell it again.
I said the state law.
Right.
Can you pass a state law that overturns a federal law?
If the federal law is in violation of the Constitution,
What federal
absolutely.
law is in violation of the Constitution?
You tell me. That's what I'm asking you. Which law is in violation? Which
No,
law?
you
which-
said this law to me is in violation.
No, I don't think I said. If I did, I misstated. How does it make it in violation of federal law?
This law is in violation because we're supposed to uphold federal gun laws. We're supposed. You're saying the state of Missouri
Okay, I think I'm
should
tracking with you now.
not uphold federal gun laws. Am I misinterpreting the bill?
I think I'm tracking with you now. Who created the federal government? I'll just ask you one question. If you don't want to answer it, that's okay. But how did the federal government come about?
I mean, we the people. But we also created state law too.
Actually, 13, I can't even count, 13 states.
Yeah.
13 states created the federal government.
That's right.
And so
And everybody else who signed on after that.
and we're one of them. Missouri is one of them. That's
They
right.
are.
Yes. And so the federal government was created so that there wouldn't be, like, for example, the Commerce Clause. We don't want states having taking actions against another state that would prohibit them from having commerce from state to state. That is a proper function of the government. When you think about the gun laws, Missouri, yes, the federal government has gun laws. In Missouri, we have our own gun laws too, and they support each other. But if the federal government wants to come in and infringe upon Missourians' ability to protect themselves, then that...
I think we're doing a good job of infringing upon the Missouri citizens' safety
How
ourselves.
So? How so?
Oh, you are.
How-
Because you have weakened the gun laws in the state of Missouri, have made it ineffective for the urban areas actually to be safe.
Okay, that's where I wanted to get. Will you allow me to read this? This is, I mean, you segued into it perfectly. May I share some information with you?
I don't want to hear it.
You don't?
No. And thank you for the inquiry.
Well, you are welcome, but I'm going to have a chance to say this sometime, I hope.
Yeah, I hope you have a chance to say it to somebody else, because you're not going to say it to me
Well,
today,
thanks
because
for
I'm
the
done talking.
toe-to-toe. Thanks
Thank
for
you
the
for the
toe-to-toe.
inquiry. Mr. President,
Senator from the 4th District.
Mr. President, can I inquire of the senator for the 20th? I'm going to give him an opportunity.
Senator from the 20th, you yield to an inquiry.
Yes.
I have said a lot of things about your bill, so I'm going to give you an opportunity to tell me
I
what
wanted
I'm
to ask
missing.
you,
What
are you
I'm
familiar
missing.
with Prigg versus Pennsylvania? I
Say
think
that
this will
again.
address some of your questions.
I'm listening.
In 1842, Justice Joseph Story held that the federal government could not force states to implement or carry out what was at that time known as the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793. That decision was the first decision where the federal government, where the court said, federal government, you cannot compel states to use their resources to enact your laws.
Well, it don't
And that
matter.
was
The
the first
states was
one.
doing it on their own anyway. That's why we had the Civil War. So we're not even gonna go there. They was doing it on their own anyway. So let me ask you this question.
You keep addressing this is unconstitutional. We have to do what the federal government says. There is a long history, Senator. There's a long history of court decisions
Let's
and
throw that out.
precedents
Here.
where the courts have said that the federal government cannot force the states to do their bidding. They can't make us do it.
Listen,
And
let's throw that out. Let's throw that out. Let's set that aside.
And
let's
it began.
set that premise aside. We're gonna set that premise aside.
I just want you to know the history of it.
We're gonna set that premise aside. We're gonna set the premise aside that, okay, we don't have to do what the federal government says. We're gonna set that aside.
Okay.
But let's just talk about Missourians and the safety of Missourians. And these people up here, let's talk about, y'all are so funny. Let's talk about Missouri and the safety of Missourians. You know, it amazes me how we talk about we want to keep Missouri safe by expanding these gun opportunities or these ability for gun, but we don't want to keep them safe when the Missouri citizens says in an initiative petition and pass it and says that we want health care. It's like the line is so crooked, it's hard to follow.
Senator, this
So
is about
hold
the
on.
Second Amendment.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's in the Constitution. It's in the Constitution. So when we're talking about keeping citizens safe and healthy. What about that right, that law? You want to make them unsafe by, first of all, invalidating the law enforcement who is supposed to protect and serve them, because you feel like you, I don't know who else, you. Because I don't see a lot of people voting on how many people came up here and said that, my Second Amendment rights is infringed upon and I don't want the police to enforce federal gun laws. So therefore, anybody in the state of Missouri, we can't trace your gun. You can kill my son. You can kill whoever. We're not going to be able to trace who has the gun because we don't want you to know that we got guns. That's what you're saying. Tell me this is not saying that.
Trust me, I can't tell you how many times I've spoken with local law enforcement or people that are within law enforcement who are happy to see this legislation. They do not want
They happen to be charged $50,000. They don't want to enforce federal gun laws.
What they want to be able to say to a federal official who's asking them to go round up firearms is to say, I'm sorry, I cannot do that. Missouri law says I cannot do that, and if I do, then there's a penalty to my agency. This gives them something that they can say to the federal government to say, you cannot compel me to do this.
So did they
and here's the
testify
reason.
in favor of this bill?
There was no testimony either way.
There was
For the
no
most part,
testimony.
there's
This bill
testimony-
has not been heard in committee.
This was testimony that was heard in committee. There was testimony for
committee was this
informational
heard in?
purposes in general laws. And
General
you can
laws.
look up the testimony. In general, since this bill left the House, I've been in constant communication with different law enforcement agencies.
But they didn't testify for the bill.
Didn't testify for, no.
They did not.
There were law enforcement officials who did testify for it, but not the associations.
And so they're okay with, you know, because I think that most police officers want to round up
They
the
do not
guns
have
because
opposition
the
to
guns
this bill.
are a threat to
this
them.
bill. They do not have opposition to this bill.
Let me tell you something. You think they don't have opposition to that bill? That's what they told you. That they don't have opposition to this bill.
I trust them when they tell me that they do not have
Let me
opposition
tell you what
to
they
the bill.
tell me all the time.
So you're saying that they have double speak?
They say up there, they say the legislature has weakened the gun laws so bad that we can't even go after the guns. And that's why you have what I call, you know, cops who are, maybe nervous or extra sensitive, you know, because of the fact that, you know, they don't know the intent of individuals and all of these people who have all of these guns. They want to round up illegal guns, but you have made them not illegal. This body, you have made them basically not illegal. I mean, really. And so
Why is it illegal to simply possess a firearm?
I'm not saying it's illegal to simply possess a firearm.
Why should it be illegal to simply
I'm saying
possess?
that, well, if right now it's not illegal to possess a firearm.
So the administration, for example, wants to make it illegal
Let's
to
go down
have
that.
a
Is it
have
illegal
a,
right
have
now
a
to have a
brace
firearm?
on a pistol.
Is it illegal right now to have a firearm?
It's illegal to have some firearms according to federal law. In
So
Missouri,
you're saying, right? Okay,
there's
wait.
certain firearms that are
so
illegal.
that means that all of that goes out the window.
No,
It doesn't.
no.
Okay. But right now, it's not illegal to have a firearm in Missouri. So what's the purpose right now of, so you're saying that you're filing this legislation because you want to prevent the federal government's ability to pass gun laws that affect the state of Missouri?
I want to prevent whatever firearm laws that they pass. I want to prevent our law enforcement from being commandeered to enforce those laws. They can pass that and they can enforce it, but they cannot take our resources and utilize them to enforce the things that they're going to go crazy with.
And we don't get any federal resources in the Department of Public Safety.
Sorry?
I say we don't get any federal resources in the Department of Public Safety.
So you're saying that they pay us to carry out their orders?
I mean, we get resources from the federal government and public safety.
Well, if I'm not going to look my constituents in the eye and say, I abandoned you and your rights simply
So
for
at
the
the same
dollar.
time, you're trying to do this at the same time. How else? What's the unintended consequences? So since you don't want us to follow the federal laws, or saying that our law enforcement should and follow federal laws, because it's my understanding that it's a cooperation between local and federal. Right now, we have a commission that has been set up right now where the feds, the local police stations, and all of that are working together to solve crime. So right now, you're saying remove the feds, ATF, and all of them from the table and just leave local law enforcement here by themselves to fight this law where they can't trace no guns, they can't do none of that. That's what you're asking. That's what you're saying.
No, it's not even in the lease.
That is, because once you say that the
when it comes
local
to-
that they shouldn't cooperate with the feds, then the feds don't have to cooperate with the local. You drawing a
Senator-
line in the sand.
Senator, so to be clear, they have nothing to worry about if a person is violating Missouri firearms laws, and there's plenty of Missouri firearms laws. And as we talked about before, most of existing Missouri firearms laws are more restrictive today than the federal gun.
But that's not,
federal
but
firearms
you
laws.
understand what I'm saying. So you trying to get a blanket immunity against federal gun. Let me answer that question. Is this a blanket immunity against federal gun laws?
No.
But your bill is penalizing this page right here.
It's not a blanket immunity. Federal officials can come in Missouri, and they are in Missouri, and they can enforce whatever they decide to enforce. And they will take them through the federal court system if they choose.
But we don't have federal police officers. We have local and state police officers.
What would you call an ATF agent?
Well, I mean, they're not in no mass, like they're not policing the street. We have ATF, that work in cooperation. We have the FBI that works in cooperation with local government, but ATF and FBI are not policing the streets. And so they work with, in order to enforce those federal laws, they work cooperatively with local police officers, local police stations. So
Right.
you're saying
and what
that...
I'm saying is if our local law enforcement is commandeered by federal agents to go round up, for example, the new item that our beloved president wants to ban is braces on pistols.
But why
So
not?
if
Why
they
not
decide,
make it?
we're going
make
to
it their
commandeer our
choice.
local law enforcement to go
Listen.
round up pistol braces,
No.
then,
What if the
then
local-
yes.
what if the local
we
police
say
department wanna
that is
work
not
with
what you're to be doing in Missouri.
No, you got your nerve. What if the local police officer department and the citizens and the taxpayers' dollars that pay those police officers want to work with those federal agencies and want to round up those and be commandeered? What you're saying in here is they can't do it. What you're saying in here is that they're going to have a $50,000 fine. You're saying that they can be sued. That's what you're saying in this bill. You're not giving them a choice.
I'm saying
You're
you
not
focus
giving them
on
a
Missouri
choice.
law. We are the Missouri taxpayers are paying them.
Local control. Local control. Let's deal with local control.
Right,
If you
this
don't
is
want
the
the
state.
state police to work with the feds, then let's do the state police. But don't mess with my local police department.
Senator, we write the laws of Missouri.
Local control. We do write the laws of Missouri,
Right.
but
and I
local
don't,
control.
and our Missouri citizens, and this
We
bill's
have
protecting our Missouri citizens.
we have an association that's working cooperatively together. They have formed this roundtable.
Right.
Formed this roundtable. It involves all the federal agencies. It involves the St. Louis County, the St. Louis City, all of these trying to solve the high areas of crime that we have. And you're saying right now that they can't do that on page 6 of this. What I want you to do is, if you want to do this, just say it belongs to the state troopers. Don't put it on my local police officers. Let's change it. Let's amend it to only deal with state troopers. Don't mandate that and decide for my local police department that the taxpayers in their city pay the salaries for, pay their pension, and pay that they can't not feel safe based on this legislation. Don't tie their hands. If you want to tie the hands of the state troopers, by all means, tie the hands of the state troopers. But don't tie the hands of my local police officer, because that's what you're doing. Because you're saying, because you're making them, they're not going to be able to enforce it with this threat that you put in this bill hanging over their head. But this is a threat. This is absolutely a threat. You're saying that they can be sued, blanket immunity for people. This is what you're saying. This is awful. They say the federal law shall be liable to the injured party in an action or lawsuit. You can't even tell the federal law, the federal government, that they could be liable. You can't even do that.
Senator, if an individual, if an agency decides they're going to go after Missourians who have committed no crime other than the fact that they have violated or have a pistol brace, that's their only crime. What I'm saying is that, yes, our law enforcement should not be commandeered.
Is that against the federal law?
If these executive orders go
what
through,
is that
then
thing
yes.
you're talking about, a pistol brace? Is that against the federal law?
That is, if you've been paying attention, that's the latest executive order of our president.
Very good. I think it's a good executive order. So
you
you're trying to say that...
So you think it's, okay, do you understand what a pistol brace does?
Listen.
An individual who is carrying a pistol, it stabilizes so that if they're trying to defend themselves, they might actually be more accurate. Do you want people to be less accurate? Do you want people to be less accurate?
That's why you have.
That's why people who know firearms should be the ones making these laws.
That's why you have training. That's why you have hours and hours of training. That's why you have shooting ranges. That's why you have people that train people how to use weapons. If you don't know how to use a weapon, you shouldn't have it.
I mean,
if you spend hours in a foxhole shooting at some moving targets, you'll probably be accurate. That guy right there probably is very accurate. I can tell you, I can look at him and tell him he's a marksman. He probably can shoot better than me, but I doubt it. We're gonna have that
In
competition
any
one
event,
day.
this is a decision that we should be making.
No.
On the state level.
No, it's not.
And I think
it's
that
not.
I think
Because
any
don't
sane
believe-
individual on the state level that would be discussing this would realize that banning pistol braces is a really dumb idea. Really dumb
Well,
idea.
you know what? I think
And yet
that
that's what's coming
it's
down
an executive order.
from Washington,
Listen.
D.C. And
Listen.
apparently our law enforcement, who has, I think, a little bit more important things to deal with than rounding up pistol braces. I think they should be spending their time on things like drugs, on true gun violence that's occurring in Missouri, where people are violating Missouri laws. That's the intent of this language.
I think that it has been executive orders from many presidents that we have not agreed with. But at the same time, I think that this legislation goes far beyond where it needs to go in dealing with cooperation between local police departments and the federal government and the federal bureaus, ACF, FBI.
And so
I
you're
think
totally okay
that
with local law enforcement circumventing the state of Missouri, circumventing the will of this General Assembly.
I
and this
don't think
body.
they're circumventing. I think that we have a system of government. And I think that system has to work in concert. And and this is not working in concert. This is out of concert. Anytime it not only takes the local control away from local police officers, it's taking citizens' rights, infringing on their rights of safety away from them. You are mandating in this bill something that I think will make citizens that I represent very unsafe. So I understand the response to executive orders, but most times it's in response for a political point. Because if Donald Trump had made the same executive order, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Senator, I was filing this bill when Donald Trump was president.
But did he make that executive order?
He did not make this executive order, no. But I have never doubted.
But let's amend.
I have never doubted the
Let's take
ability
a
of
friendly
people.
amendment. Let's take a friendly amendment to this legislation and make it simply apply to state officers and not local. Because I think you're tying the hands of what we're trying to do. You're impeding progress. Because you don't live where I live. And we're trying to tackle an issue from all different angles. And one of those angles is a cooperative roundtable of law enforcement, local and federal, working together to solve it. Another way we're trying to tackle it is dealing with the economic issues that promote crime. Got me? So when you're doing this and you file this legislation, it's going to cause my local officers to stand down and not be able to work cooperatively. That's what I believe.
I disagree.
Well, you might disagree.
I
But I'm
strongly
telling
disagree.
you, what you're saying, you saying
I've
they
had
forward, I got
officers
text
in-
messages that they're not. So you are okay, but my phone not saying the same thing your phone's saying. Got me? So I understand. We have to protect our districts. And I bear arms. And I think people should bear arms. But I also think we need common sense gun laws. Because I like to balance scales of justice. I think they're supposed to be balanced. And having common sense gun laws and things like that without infringing upon the safety of others is important.
So what
How
common sense,
we do it.
what laws do you want?
What laws do I want?
Right, you bear arms. You said you bear arms. You're able to defend yourself. What laws do you want?
I think that we need to have better checks on guns. I think that when you buy these guns on the road at these shows, they don't do checks. So I think we need to change that. Because I've been to a lot of gun shows too.
Keep going.
Well, those just a few. I mean, I got a whole list. I got to pull up a list.
So, and you,
But
this is
I
your.
think that you need to ban automatic weapons, especially in the urban area. That's right. I think they only need them because I think they only for a war zone.
Senator, you have to have a federal permit, and it is very difficult to get that, to have
maybe
an
we
automatic
need to
firearm.
ban the clips on some of these weapons because, you know, some of them, you know, have extended clips.
So you want to limit the how much someone's able to defend themselves.
No, you keep saying defending, but what about on the other side? People that don't want to have weapons but just want to walk around safe because they got the police. You know what I'm saying? So it's two sides. You keep looking at the one side. See, both of us looking at the same thing. You just looking at one side. And it's another side too.
Yeah,
and
I
so you got
understand.
you got to say, what about that person? See, if that person didn't have that clip with all of them guns in it, and he just had a revolver, he couldn't have killed all of them people.
Okay, so
One life
and
is
I'll
too
just
many.
say, of the crimes that have occurred and people that are in prison for gun-related crimes, about less
you
than
think people wanna
2% acquired their firearms and/or their accessories legally.
I think we
So
need to
you
track
can
the
pass
sale of
whatever
weapons.
law that you want to pass.
I think we need to track the sale of weapons, private weapons, from one person to another.
You're only reducing the ability of law-abiding citizens who wish to do no harm to anyone else but just to defend themselves.
I
That's
don't have
all
a
you're
problem
doing.
with you knowing the serial numbers of the guns I own. I don't have a problem with you regulating where I can take them guns. I don't have a problem with that, you know. And then you know, so you know, I don't want to walk in. You want to walk in a amusement park, you know. I mean, with open carry. I mean, this is not, I don't want to live in the Wild Wild West. I don't want to live in the Wild Wild West. And I want the police to be able to trace the guns. I want them to be able to use the federal government to find out who's shooting those guns, where those guns came from, who was killed the last time. I want all
Senator,
that to be able to happen.
I have seen, and I'll have to get you the data, that people refer to the Wild Wild West as though this was some violent culture where people just opened up. Senator, it wasn't. And I'll get you the articles on that. I don't have them readily available to me, but you know, what happened historically is you had these events like the OK Corral, you had the shooting where Wild Bill Hickok shot a man over a pocket watch in downtown Springfield. And those few instances were spread like wildfire through the news, and they became sensationalized, and people all over the world took those stories, and that's what they thought about, and they made them legend, right? And it's still today. We create legend about what happened, how the West was, but more people were killed by a lot more other things, including natural disasters and even mountain lions and other things than they were by
So what do you want to see in reference to guns?
And so what I'm saying
You
is,
want to, what is your ideal world with guns?
that
What is your ideal
individuals
world?
are able to defend themselves and
No,
their rights and their liberties.
don't talk to me about defending. What do you want to see? You want to see people walking around with what you call that thing, gun braces on their arm. Everybody have one of those on their arm. You want people to walk around with those. You want people to just walk around with weapons on
I
all
want
the
government
time.
I want government to stay out of people's lives. I want people to be
Well,
free.
you can't have it both ways, because see, you in people's lives, then you be out of people's lives. See, you know, the Republican Party, y'all have that thing where y'all want them to be out, and then you want them to be in. It's only when you want them to be in when it's convenient to you, then out when it's not convenient to you. That is your policy. Don't get me started going down church lines. That's the truth.
I want government out.
You like the senator over there. I mean, you know, he said, well, don't even get me started. I ain't gonna go there. So listen, let me tell you this, Senator. I'm gonna go over here to this table and I'm gonna amend your legislation. I want to thank you for the inquiry, but I'm definitely getting ready to amend this bill because I am going to take out my local area. If I don't take out all local areas, but I'm going to make this bill only apply to state, since you want to have that conversation, because I think it's too broad, and I think that you are interfering with relationships that are already working, especially in the local area, because it took us some time to get that little commission together. You get what I'm saying? And we are on the road to reducing it. Now, and then I don't want people untrained with a gun. Let me tell you one thing I appreciated about Army ROTC. Let me tell you what I appreciate about it. You had to know your weapon. You had to know how to use your weapon. You had to know how to clean it. You had to know how to take it apart and put it back together. Not only did you have to know how to do that, you had to know how to accurately shoot. That was essential. Accuracy. That's why you spend hours. I used to be so upset sitting in this little foxhole, all this doggone dust everywhere. I was saying to myself, the foolishness of it. But when I look back, I understood the training was essential and necessary, because it not only dealt with your physical ability to handle a weapon, it dealt with your mental ability when it came to the weapon. It requires that training, to me, because we have people without the mental capacity to handle conflict resolution. We have people who don't have the mental capacity to handle their emotions. That's why they are walking in places and just shooting people. They walked in this Asian place and shot those people because they couldn't have a mental capacity to deal with whatever foolishness was going through their head. That's what I'm talking about. So I know you're looking at my ability to defend myself, but at the same time, I'm looking at chaotic people just shooting. Everybody's shooting. And I'm looking at mass casualty. I ain't gonna know who shot who when you go in that room, because ain't nobody really been trained to handle guns. They think they can. Anybody can pull a trigger. A gun could never be a toy. Never.
Agree.
And anybody can pull a trigger. That's a problem. But do you have the mental capacity to handle that weapon and to carry that weapon? That's the key. And see, that's the problem we have, and the ignorance of these young people, and lowering the age in the state of Missouri for people to be able to get weapons. I don't agree with that. The only people that should be able to get weapons at that age are people who have went to the military, because they have had the extensive training. These other people whose minds or haven't even been mentally developed, especially young men until they're 28 and 29, and they still ain't developed then. I'm a mother. I grew up in a violent neighborhood. It came violent over time. But when I was a child, it wasn't. But then it got there. Do you know how many dead bodies? I always ask people this. Have you ever seen a dead body? Have you ever seen somebody got shot? You know, so I know that we want to do the same thing. You want people to be able to protect themselves. But I also want people to be able to feel safe too. So how do we balance that equation?
I feel
and you're
safer.
saying
I feel
put a
safer
gun in their
knowing,
hand is what's making them feel safe.
I feel safer knowing that there are people
You
who
feel
are,
safer.
I feel safer knowing that there are people who are able to carry. I feel
You
safer,
feel safer.
because I know
What about the
that law
individuals?
enforcement is not always there. They're not always immediately there.
Listen, we have, I'm finished with this, and I'm gonna be done with this inquiry. We have too many prejudices. Too many individual prejudices in society. People find excuses to harm people because of simple prejudices. That means simple ignorance and no tolerance for difference. And you want to arm them all? I can't do that. That's what I'm talking about. I can't do that. Because if that's the case, I'm going to really have to take up arms. You got what I'm saying? That's all I'm saying.
I
Thank
think
you
that-
for the inquiry.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator from the 1st.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to offer an amendment.
Please send the amendment forward, and has the amendment been distributed?
I request a waiver of the reading, and it has not been distributed yet.
Hearing no objection, the reading will be waived. Please move for the adoption of the amendment and proceed with your explanation.
I move for the adoption of the amendment. Explanation. Thank you, Mr. President. This is a simple amendment, and I've been listening to the conversation all day. It's been pretty riveting, actually. But I have an amendment here I think that could make this bill better. And what this would do, it's a simple, very, very simple amendment. It would not allow anybody to sell a weapon, knowingly sell a weapon to somebody who is on a no-fly list or associate it with two or more. I can read it to you, that might just be easier. Or such a person is a member of a group of two or more individuals, regardless of organized, that engages in or has a subgroup that engages in international or domestic terrorism. For purpose of this subdivision, terrorism means activities that involve a violent act or acts dangerous to human life and that are a violation of the criminal laws of the United States or the state thereof, or that would be a criminal violation if committed within the jurisdiction of the United States or a state thereof, and appear to be intended to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, B, influence the policy of a government by intimidation or coercion, or C, affect the conduct of a government by mass destruction, assassination, or kidnapping. So what this bill would simply do is your local, your licensed gun dealers would not be allowed knowingly sell, lease, loan, or give away, deliver a firearm to any person who has their name appear on a terrorist screening center's no-fly list. If I have 5 members here, 5 members standing, I would like to get a roll call on this amendment, please.
Seeing 5 members standing, you're granted a roll call.
And I'm open to any questions.
We are on the adoption of Senate Amendment Number 1. Does any other senator desire to be heard? Senator from the 31st.
Thank you, Mr. President. To inquire of the senator from the 1st.
Senator the 1st, do you yield to inquire from the senator from the 31st?
I do.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Senator. I haven't received your amendment, but hearing your explanation, while that sounds very noble, back during the Obama administration, did you know that the former President Obama placed returning war veterans on the domestic terrorist watch list? So by doing this, you potentially would put veterans of foreign wars being prohibited from buying firearms in the state of Missouri.
Senator, people that are on a no-fly list or for reasons they're on their farm are terrorists or whatever the case may be.
But the
now, we can talk about getting
administration
off a list.
actually put them on the terrorist watch list. People coming back from the Iraq war as potential terrorists of this nation. So this is an absolute train wreck of an amendment.
I think it's a great amendment. It's actually
well, I'm sorry. I don't think the returning war veterans felt very proud to have their very nation declare them as domestic terrorists. And I don't think that,
I really never heard that happen, so I don't know that.
Well, I would encourage you to Google it real quick, and you'll be able to find it.
You can Google it for me, or you can.
Well, I'm just explaining that really did occur, and we were placed on a domestic terrorist watch list. Not to mention, a militia is actually considered by the federal government has deemed militias under that, which is crazy to me because it actually is enshrined in our Second Amendment. That
which militias are you talking about, Senator? Are you talking about the ones that set up to kidnap the governor of
that's
Michigan?
The thing with the militia.
That kind of militia? Are you talking about a state-sponsored militia? Are you talking about a militia that just sponsors themselves?
Where does it explain a state-sponsored militia? See, a militia was farmers. They were bakers.
Senator,
they were people.
Are you defending the militias that tried to kidnap the governor of Michigan?
I'm defending militias being thrown in the mix, where you are literally going to throw anyone who's a part of any militia to a prohibition of buying a firearm. That's what I'm about. And this administration and prior administrations have been very easily applicable to throwing veterans of foreign wars on these lists, and just any sort of state militia could potentially be thrown up in your definition. So
yeah, if they engage in international or domestic terrorism. Yes.
Well, I guess if you read the Declaration of Independence,
domestic terrorism or international terrorism,
you know, the actual signers of the Declaration were considered domestic terrorists at that time as well. So, you know, I think this is a poor amendment and would actually encompass, or has the potential to encompass, you know, people who have defended this nation. So
and
I
I'm all
appreciate
for people
the
to defend this nation. Absolutely, Senator. Thank you.
Mr. President, to inquire of the Senator.
3 senators standing. Senator from the 20th.
Mr. President, I raise a point of order. The amendment goes beyond the title. The title of the underlying bill is additional protections to the rights to bear arms, to the right to bear arms. This is not only in the section of the bill, it obviously doesn't provide, it takes away protections to the right to bear arms. Not only that, but it opens up an entirely new section of statute. And I would ask
we will refer that point of order to the President Pro Tem. Senator from the 7th. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think that making sure that terrorists in the United States don't have firearms will increase the likelihood that law-abiding Americans continue to have their right to have firearms. So making sure that terrorists aren't walking around our country with guns does not give crazy liberals like me the idea to go out and take guns away from everyone. So I hope that this amendment or this point of order will not be well taken.
Any other discussion on the point of order? Senator from the 24th.
Thank you, Mr. President. To speak against the point of order.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have to concur with the analysis of the senator from the 7th, and I think that the title, the additional protections to the right to bear arms, just tells us, as long as there is some common sense to make sure that terrorists aren't bearing arms, that it will allow people in this state to continue on a path where bearing arms continues to be a right. So I think that it has the opposite effect of what the senator from the 20th stated when he got up and said that it doesn't fit under the title. It absolutely does. It makes the right to bear arms more reasonable when we take away that right from the people who are out there and intending and likely to do harm. I also think when you consider the fact, Mr. President, that so many people take their lives with guns, including 22 veterans per day, 22 veterans per day, that the protections to the right to bear arms means that we need to make sure that the guns are in the hands of the people who are not going to hurt themselves and others unless it's called for. And so for those reasons, Mr. President, I am asking a ruling against the point of order.
Does any other senator desire to be heard on the point of order? It has been referred to the President Pro Tem.
Okay, gang, I'm going to talk a little bit here while we're waiting them to come back on. I'll even turn the camera on. Okay. I suppose we have a lot to talk about, gang, huh? I know a lot of your thoughts already, actually. I've had the same thoughts. Now, that Carla gal that was talking helped our cause, believe it or not. That's why things like that are allowed to go on, trust me. I understand how these things work. But it was embarrassing. For those of you who don't live in Missouri and are listening to this, this is a live Senate debate in Jefferson City, in our state capital. And that was actually a senator, and there was actually a couple of them talking earlier, but the ignorance on display was astounding, absolutely astounding. But that is common with Democrats who don't really know guns. They don't know guns, they don't know gun laws, they don't know gun parts. So, I mean, I don't know what to say, gang. I mean, please don't judge most of Missourians, by this. Most of us actually know guns pretty well. So does anyone have any questions at this point in time? Just throw them up in the chat if you have any questions. I know some of you were wondering what was going on with what bill, Red Wing. Let's see, their body, their say, people shooting themselves, a gun issue. If a person can't get to a gun, they will take pills. Yep, both oath breakers. It happens on both sides. I agree with you, Red Wing. But this is an important first step to getting the Fed out of Missouri. And that is correct. They don't know the original intent. In fact, I had an argument with someone on Facebook about this very, very recently. It was last week. I knew this would turn into, hey there, a tribulation prepper. Knew this would turn into a dog and pony show. Mrs. May is the biggest pony's ass in the show. I know, man. I know. Hey, Free American Press, come live in Missouri. Go live in those districts and get someone to run against these guys. That's what you do. They're from districts, so it's not like we collectively can get them voted out of office. It really takes someone who they might be voting tonight, but not on the bill itself, but on actually updating the bill from the House version that actually has been vetted and went through a perfection process. Let's see, are there time limits, or would this can go all night long? I've never seen anything go all night long. I've seen stuff go until 1 o'clock in the morning sometimes. But this isn't their time to really filibuster. They're just wasting time at this point because we only have 3 weeks left during the legislative season. The time to filibuster is when it comes to a vote for the actual bill to pass it through the Senate. That's when they'll do it. This was definitely a filibuster. But guys, just trust me, when May is speaking, she helps the cause. And you guys may not believe me on this right now, but trust me, it does. We are to have equal arms as the government. That is correct, Parker. I agree with that. Can you explain the political landscape? Craig, okay, yeah, Craig. It's basically the Second Amendment Preservation Act, which has been passed through the House and has gone up to the Senate. And now the Senate is debating the Second Amendment Preservation Act. You got to hear a lot of really stupid arguments from the other side. It's the same old stuff we hear every time. So we let them speak because basically they they make fools of themselves. They put their ignorance on display for everyone to see, and it doesn't actually help the other cause at all. It actually hurts the other cause. Can Missouri get St. Louis out of the state? No, Free American Press. That's not going to happen. St. Louis is going to stay in the state of Missouri. Let's see. Yes, this is our state assembly, is what you guys have been listening to. And yes, they're voting tonight, but they're not voting on passage of the bill, so to speak. I believe they're upgrading the bill from the House, or the House version will become the Senate version. I think that's what they're trying to do. No permission necessary for natural rights. Yep, I agree with that. The Constitution agrees with you on that, Parker, as well. M. Gabriel, so they're going to vote on HB 85-310 tonight. I believe that's what they're attempting to do. is to actually figure out which bill they are going to, work on in the Senate. Is it going to be the one that's already been perfected, through the House process, or is it going to be the one that is the original bill from January, the current Senate bill, which is 39? And I think that's what this whole thing about tonight is all about. But now I'll go back to free press. Hey, Alex, it's very difficult to get these people out of office. They serve areas that don't, I would just say that the landscape of their districts reflects the personality and intelligence quotient of the people representing them. Did I say that without offending anybody? I heard that when Missouri annexed the boot heel, both Arkansas and Missouri got dumber. It's entirely possible. It's entirely possible. I'm on the other side of the state from the boot heel, by the way. I'm in the Springfield area. I'm still waiting to hear from Ron Calzone, by the way, on my cell phone, gang. Because I don't think they're done tonight. I think they've turned off the microphones because whatever they're doing, they didn't want to have public. That's what I think's going on. So, Alex, the challenge for us in Missouri is to educate those voting districts that you heard those people speaking from. And that's a large task. So those are the people who decide who their representation is. And remember now, we're talking about public schools as well. Yep. So unfortunately, that's the way these debates go in Missouri. I saw that for when we went for constitutional concealed carry, guys. I meant the the arguments there were astoundingly stupid, and it was reflected by KY3, one of our local news affiliates. It was embarrassing. Sheriffs and politicians saying, "Oh, when we get constitutional concealed carry, it'll be the Wild West. Neighbors will be shooting each other over property lines. Bar fights will turn into gunfights, all that kind of stuff. Wild West stuff. Wild West." I love hearing that. And, of course, none of that ever happened. And violent crime has gone down in Missouri some 80% since we've had constitutional concealed carry. So it does work. So anyone else have any questions or any comments they'd like to share about what you guys saw tonight? I know some of you are probably reeling from all this, and I'm sorry I've put you through this, but I thought you guys might like to see the process as it goes through in the Senate. The House is actually an easier process. I did actually do a video on what happened in the House. The House has video because they have cameras, and the Senate does not. They only have audio. The local news is bought off. Well, I don't know if they're bought off. It's their Free American Press. I would say that the local news is placating ignorance, willful ignorance. I think that's what they were doing. Can they redistrict Missouri? Yes, but that depends on where the voters live. It depends on the populations within districts. It's the same as everywhere else in the United States. I called every member of the Republican leadership in regards to the constitutional carry. Okay, Gabriel. Yep, I did too. I was heavily involved with that as well. So, and that was just a landslide. We actually had that on the ballot. That was a nice deal. The idiocy of the black senator is astounding. Patrick, I can't disagree with you. But like I said, letting her go on like that actually helps. I know that sounds really weird, but I'm familiar with these types of politicians, and that's why they let them go on. They try to buy off local papers. I'm not sure it was necessary to buy off local papers. It was really a deal about literally just placating to the willful ignorance that existed out there. A lot of local new outlets are owned and managed by nationwide media corporations. Yeah, and they're all anti-gun, to be sure. But for them to echo the Wild West, like senators were saying and sheriffs were saying, was, like I said, placating ignorance. That's what they were doing when they did that. You know, Ron is still not responding to me. So you guys know my secret weapon now. When stuff like this is going on and I can't be up in Jeff City, I talk to Ron Calzone via text on the cell phone. And that's how I find stuff out. So he's usually there. That's what I mean by that. But I'll tell you what, though, if they don't go back live here real soon, I may end the live stream. I'll do a refresh here on the feed because they've been down for over 20 minutes now. Yeah, still nothing. Let's see. My local paper is owned by a huge company. Yeah, I understand. It does happen. Lived in Springfield when I was from Red Wing. When I was working a job out that way, loved the fishing on the Sauk River. I know the James River is a big one that goes through Springfield. Miss some of the people. Great motorcycle country. Yes, it is. A lot of motorcyclers here, for sure. And they drive through here constantly. Large groups of them. So, who is Ron Calzone? Very good question. Let me bring up Missouri first. This is Ron Calzone's page. Ron Calzone is a libertarian, kind of like myself. And what he does is he is a self-made man, and he spends all of his time, and not for money, lobbying the state of Missouri to remove laws, to get better laws put in, reduce the size of government. That's a very big part of what he does, all for free. He doesn't accept donations. He doesn't give money to politicians. And Ron Calzone and his attorney are the ones who actually developed the Second Amendment Preservation Act. And all the states that are actually going through this legislation right now actually come from Missouri's Second Amendment Preservation Act language. We're the first state to have it. So that's who Ron Calzone is. And a very, very, very good guy to have in our state. He is constantly...
Senator from the 20th.
Oh, there we go. There we go, guys. They're back on.
Please proceed. Oh, wait, I didn't hear you. The point of order is withdrawn. Senator from the 31st, you had the floor.
Mr. President, I withdraw my amendment.
Madam Secretary, please send that amendment back. The amendment will be sent back. Madam Secretary, please send that amendment back. We are on the Senate substitute for Senate Bill 39. Does any other senator desire to be heard on the adoption of the Senate substitute? Senator from the 20th.
President, please lay that bill on the informal calendar.
That bill will be laid over on the informal calendar. Senator from Boone.
Thank you, Mr. President. Without objection, the Senate will go to the order of business of House bills for third reading on the informal calendar, and I'd ask that you recognize the senator from Dallas County for a motion on House Bill 271.
Hearing no objection, the Senate will move to the order of business of House bills for third read on the informal calendar. Senator from Dallas.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we bring House Committee Substitute for House Bill 271 from the informal calendar.
The senator from Dallas moves that House Committee Substitute for House Bill 271 with Senate
I
Committee
didn't go through the whole
Substitute
string.
be taken up for third reading and final passage. As many of those opinion that the motion shall prevail, say aye. Those to the contrary say no. The ayes have it. Does the senator care to move for the adoption and explain the substitute?
Thank you, Mr. President. Would you send that substitute back, and I have a new substitute?
That substitute shall be sent back. Please send your new substitute forward.
And I move for the adoption of the new substitute.
Do you move to request a waiver of the reading?
Yes, I do.
Hearing no objection, the reading will be waived. Senator, do you care to explain your bill?
I will do that. Well, I think when we left off on maybe amendment number 27.
Could we get some order in the chamber while the senator is explaining her bill, please?
Thank you, Mr. President. We had several amendments offered on this bill. We needed to make a couple of changes, so we took the amendments into consideration and put them into a new sub, and I'm going to tell you what we did in the sub. First of all, the Senator for Andrew had some language on one of his amendments that, and that's section 478.600 that was problematic, so he wanted that pulled off. So we removed that. We also, the Senator from Franklin, his amendment, there was a miscommunication on that amendment, and they had agreed upon some language, and the wrong amendment was offered. So this pulled the old amendment off and put the new one on. We took out the Senator from Green's amendment that was pulled back, and then the Senator from Jefferson's amendment had a typo when it referenced a section, and it was supposed to be 67.2815, and it was just a typo, and it was listed as 67.815. Everything else stayed in. We just combined it into a substitute, made those changes that we needed, and that's where we are currently. I'm happy to answer any questions.
We are on the adoption of the Senate substitute for House Committee Substitute for House Bill 271 with Senate Committee Substitute. Does any senator desire to be heard? Senior Senator from Jefferson.
Mr. President, for a gray-haired man, you better be careful. I have an amendment, and it's short, and I would ask that it be read.
Please send your amendment forward, and has the amendment been distributed? And Madam Secretary, please read the amendment.
Senate Amendment 1, offered by Senator Whelan. Amend Senate Substitute Number 2, Senate Committee Substitute, House Committee Substitute, House Bill Number 271, page 11, Section 50.332, lines 1 through 18, by striking all of said section of the bill, and further amend title and enacting clause accordingly.
Senator from Jefferson, please move for the adoption of the amendment and proceed with your explanation.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the Senate amendment's adoption. And basically, this is undoing an amendment I put on earlier that created a bigger problem than I understood at the time. So I think it's something we need to talk about more instead of putting it on this bill. I'd rather just take it off, and we'll undo what we did earlier this afternoon. Be happy to answer any questions.
Does any senator desire to be heard on Senate Amendment Number 1? Senator from Dallas.
Thank you, Mr. President. To inquire of the Senator from Jefferson.
Senator from Jefferson, do you yield to inquiry?
Absolutely.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator. I just wanted to say thank you. We kind of ran into a little glitch after we were kind of putting the bill together, and I just wanted to say thank you for being willing to pull that back off And I do think it's a topic we need to talk about, and we're not finished on that topic, but for now, we are going to pull it back off this bill just so it doesn't cause a problem. I wanted to say thank you for that, but I'm not done talking about that subject either.
Okay, I'm sure we're not, and like I said, I appreciate your willingness to allow me to put it on there to start with, and like I said, I don't want to hold up your bill, so I think it's the best interest of everybody involved to pull it back at this point in time.
I appreciate that. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Does any other senator desire to be heard? Seeing none, the senator from Jefferson is recognized to close on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I close.
The senator from Jefferson renews his motion that Senate Amendment Number 1 be adopted. As many of those opinions that motion shall prevail, please say aye. Aye. Those of the contrary say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The amendment is adopted. Does any other senator desire to be heard on Senate substitute for House Committee substitute for House Bill 271 with Senate Committee substitute? Senator from the 7th.
May I inquire the senator from Dallas?
Senator from Dallas, do you yield to inquire from the senator from the 7th?
I do.
Please proceed.
Senator, you know how this works. We have this big sub kind of plopped in front of us, and so I'm just quickly kind of going through.
Yes.
And I just want to confirm that what's in here is what we passed today. Everything we passed today, the senator just removed his amendment, and there's no other surprises in here, correct?
And you probably didn't hear me early. I kind of went through that, but we took out the senator from Green's amendment, and we made a change on the senator from Franklin's amendment. He had offered the incorrect one. Senator from Andrew had some language on his amendment that was going to cause some problems, so we pulled it back. And the other change was dealing with the amendment that Senator from Jefferson just pulled off, so that's a moot point at this time. That is all the changes that we made. Everything else is in the bill, and surprisingly, it's 100 pages and it's about 30 bills, so it's about 3 pages per bill, which it's not near as big as I thought it might be.
Absolutely. All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Does any other senator desire to be heard? Senator from Dallas, you're recognized to close. Hearing none, Senator from Dallas, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. President. I close.
The senator from Dallas renews her motion that Senate substitute.
Okay, gang. I think they have finished with SAPA, and that happened when they turned off the microphones. So I really don't know the conclusion of that because they're talking about 271. I just looked it up, and that has nothing to do with SAPA. Nothing that I know of, anyway. And yes, Schatz has been somewhat problematic with SAPA. He has been extremely problematic with SAPA, and I'm going to do an expose video on Schatz here when we're done with the legislative season, because there's nothing we can do about him now. I prefer dangerous liberty over peaceful servitude. I don't care what these scumbags do. I get it, Parker. I get it. I'm pretty much in the same boat. However, that's something I'd love to talk about sometime. I have a lot of anarchist friends. Anarchists and libertarians are close cousins. And I'm a libertarian. And my anarchist friends say, screw the government, do what you want to do. Well, that doesn't stop the law enforcement from, literally taking you and putting you in a cage. So we have to work with the perceptions that everyone believes in right now. Anarchy is a wonderful thing. I understand it. I get it. But the people generally don't. So if we were to just say, well, gosh darn it, the federal laws simply don't apply to me because they're unconstitutional, and I start running around with a machine gun, I will be shot dead. So we try to work within the framework of civil law to get back to common law. In the common law that we still have in America. It's not a myth, it's real. Common law still exists. You just have to know your way around a courtroom to do it. And believe me, common law is quite powerful. I understand it. So we're dealing with perceptions. So, that's the difficult thing to deal with. You're dealing with generations and generations of public schooling. You got to root that out of the people because they've been brainwashed by that and by the media and also That's a dangerous part. I'm no anarchist as long as they obey the supreme law. Yeah, I get it. Okay, and by the way, I was saying that because my anarchist friends say it. So I didn't mean to make an assumption that you were anarchist. It's just that, basically some of the things you're saying I do get from my anarchist friends. And I do have plenty of them, trust me. So, yep, they obey the supreme law. Well, a lot of people will say, what's the recourse if people don't obey the supreme law? Common law and common sense. Yep, I agree. We should go back to common law right away, instantaneously. If corporate law has been such a bane on our society, look at the, just the fascism that exists now. Like, for instance, I'm not going to talk too much about the serum because it's a good way to get a strike on YouTube if you talk about the serum. But the serum itself, the manufacturers of the serum have no liability whatsoever. That would never happen in common law, ever. If, you take a serum and it chemically damages you or kills you, there would be recourse under common law. And that's not true under corporate law. Give the feds an inch and they take a mile. Tyrants know no bounds. Agreed, Patrick. Yeah, and there's a lot of tyrants out there. And that's one thing we're trying to do here in the state of Missouri is start getting the Fed off our backs. Okay, no problem, Gabriel. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, by the way. I know that it was a little bit painful, but it was probably really educational, too. They operate outside the Bill of Rights, which renders them illegitimate. Yep, they act as criminals. That is correct. I agree with that. You won't find me in disagreement with any of that. But the perception, re-educating the public, we'd have to get rid of the public schools first. And it'll probably take a generation or two to re-educate everybody to what common law is and what their rights are under the Constitution of the United States. 95% of all the laws coming out of D.C. are unconstitutional. I think most of us know that. Thank you for posting. Awesome chatters here on Salt of the Earth. Prayer in the air to all. Second forever. Fourth all the way. Hey, I agree with you, Red Wing. And no problem, buddy. I was happy to be able to post this for you guys tonight. You guys can see the process we're going through. And it's a painful one, and it takes a little bit longer now because of the crap that Schatz has put us through. Ouch. Painful and understatement. I know, Todd. I'm sorry, but at least you got to see it. You got to see the crap we go through here. But trust me, as painful as it was with those two women going on for like an hour, it was actually very helpful to the cause. Trust me, it actually was helpful. You'll find out, later on. I'm sure you'll see it. But as ignorant as they were quite helpful. So that's why they're allowed to go on. That's why no one shuts them down. And by the way, I've seen this before. So I'm not, this isn't my first rodeo when I get to see this. Yeah, it was a live feces show. I know it was. I'm sorry. Yep, but at least it's recorded for posterity now. Other states can see the kind of crap that they'll go through with their ignorant senators and their ignorant House members. So they can prepare arguments in advance. So that's why I like to do this stuff on YouTube. And this will also be on Odyssey, and I'll upload it to BitChute as well. So it'll be there for posterity's sake. Let's see. This guy is seriously not good at arguing. Oh, you're talking about Eric? And that's true. And Eric has some pinch hitters. And so you guys actually saw there was a couple, or heard, there's a couple other guys came up and were working, the Second Amendment Preservation Act. So he has some pinch hitters to come in and help him with the bill. So, and you're right, he is not very good at arguing on certain things. Just have to bow down and obey. No, I'm not going to bow down and obey, and neither should you, Parker. At least on our side. Yep. So I'll tell you what, if any of you are curious, my basic feeling is we're going to get the Second Amendment Preservation Act this year. We're going to get it within 3 weeks. But I have concerns about what state it will be in, how damaged it'll be. So we got to fight every inch. We absolutely cannot give in. You guys remember that amendment where that guy was saying, "Oh, people on the no-fly list, the law wouldn't apply to them." You see, that's simple nonsense. this bill wouldn't allow for that. America, that's right. So, but I'm very, very glad all you guys were here and you got to see some of this. And like I said, I really do consider it an education, especially for states who are still going through this process. So this way they get to see all that crap that will come up. I mean, you drag $100 bill through a trailer park, you're going to get some trash, And that's exactly what we got tonight. We got some trash. And we were expecting it. We knew this was coming. And by the way, if that was an official filibuster, it was an unscheduled one, but it certainly sounded like one. Sorry, I'm a one-track mind dissident. That's all right, Parker. I still love you, man. And I thank you very much for coming in to the live stream tonight. And all points of view are allowed. All of them. Without multiple perspectives from multiple points of view from multiple people, we don't grow, do we? It's really good to be able to critically think as a group. It makes us all better. All of us. Okay, gang, I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. And I want to thank you again for joining me this evening. And by the way, there should be more stuff coming up. And in fact, there may be another hearing tomorrow. And if that's the case, I will also live stream that. Once again, it'll be audio only because it's in the Senate now. It's not in the House. Still on the eliminate the Fed. States are the power, below us. Yep, that's correct, Todd. Did they pass SAPA? I don't know. Honestly, don't know. I think that happened during the blackout period. And I'll have an answer for you tomorrow why they did a blackout for so long. I'll get that information from you, or for you. I'm a student of the framers, so I guess I'm just a radical. Hey, listen, I am too. I'm a student of the framers as well. And most of them were, libertarian constitutionalists by today's standards anyway. And that's a lot further to the right. They didn't want, anarchy. They wanted, little limited government. But they also put the Second Amendment in for a reason. And I recently had a debate with someone on Facebook about this. Some guy who claimed to be a learned, guy who studies the Constitution. He says, I've never seen an argument for the Second Amendment for taking back your government. And I said, oh, really? Let me introduce you to the Federalist Papers and the letters in between the Founding Fathers. They were very specific about the Second Amendment and why they put it in. They just didn't put into the Second Amendment, by the way, gang, we're putting the Second Amendment in so you can take back your government. They just didn't say it that way, but they did say it in the Federalist Papers and in the letters in between the founders. So you don't have to interpret the Second Amendment. You can actually read the letters. Liberals of their day. Well, I don't know if I would call them liberals of their day because they were radicals of their day for sure. And like I said, some people will actually call them terrorists because they were fighting the crown. How dare you fight the crown? How dare you disobey the crown? How dare you challenge the crown? That was what was going on in their day. Republic rules, democracy is trash. Yep, democracy would never work here. And the Founding Fathers even knew a democracy wouldn't work here. The only thing we have that's a democracy in our government is the act of voting. That is the only part of our government that can actually be called a democracy. The government itself is supposed to be a constitutional republic, which means, of course, that we elect officials to represent us while they adhere to and observe all the restrictions put on them by the Constitution. And that hasn't worked out. That hasn't been our government for a long, long time. We actually have a socialist fascist government in America right now, even though it's a soft version of socialism. Well, actually, the fascism is not soft. It's quite hard. Democracy is two wolves and a lamb deciding on what's for dinner. Yep. Liberty is a well-armed lamb contesting the vote. I agree with you. I agree with you. Parker, you are so right on that. I love it. Okay, gang, but I'm seriously going to disconnect here. I'm going to go get some dinner here and get some sleep tonight. I didn't get much last night, but guys, there is a strong possibility there's another hearing tomorrow. I will find out from Ron in a little while, and I will also get an answer for you as to why we had this blackout, because I think that's when they finished up SAPA. They turned off the microphones for some reason. So Ron will have the inside scoop on that, and I'll get it from Ron. Okay, well, thanks again, everyone, for joining tonight. I really do appreciate you guys. I'm glad you're watching the process. Don't forget to call your senators and tell them to, basically represent you and not some ideal or special interest, and make sure that they represent the Constitution, which they swore an oath to. And it's really easy. It's a phone call. By the way, I got up at 3:30 this morning and started calling all the senators. So a lot of them are voicemails, but I did talk to a few of them as well. No, literally, it's called classical liberalism. Oh, yes, classical liberalism. Yes, you're right. Ben Franklin, you're right. Classical liberal. Yes, I agree with you. And hey, thank you for being in the podcast, Patrick. It was all the better for having you here as well. So thank you, Todd, Patrick, Parker, Ultra, Free American Press. There's a whole bunch of you that came in. J, Def TW. So thank you guys. You guys all have a good evening. May God bless each and every one of you. Stay tuned. We may have another live stream tomorrow with more arguments. Take care, gang.